Join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we have a roll call?
Yes. Lauren Haas. Here. Charles Venuto.
Present.
John Byron.
Yo.
Vinnie Toronto. John Windsor.
Here.
Terry Casto. David Lane will not be here. He had a commitment. Karen McLaughlin. Here. Stephanie Ely.
Here.
John Durkee.
Here.
Courtney Barker. Todd Swingle.
Here.
Jean Artusa.
Here.
Danielle Bowden. Here. I believe we're
Thank you. We want to move the public comment up again. It worked well last meeting, and so we're going to try it again this meeting. So I would entertain a motion to change and approve the agenda.
I have a motion to approve the agenda as written with two changes: to move general public comment in front of other reports and special presentations, allocated 20 minutes a time, and if more time is necessary, continue general public comments after new business.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I had a question about the motion. If no time is you said in the first part, that means
20 minutes, and in clarification, and as came up last time, if we exhaust general public comments in the first 20 minutes, item item 9 has no place in the agenda.
Okay, that's perfect.
We don't have two periods. One more thing I'll say since I've got the floor. I intend to, if it works this time, to draft a minor change to the bylaws and bring it forward at the next meeting for us to look at and perhaps vote on the meeting after to accommodate this.
Is there any further discussion?
I do have a little bit of concern with the splitting it up and saying if we don't have enough time, because it's either, one of the concerns at the last meeting was we had some people then, the discussion after our topics, and then people came up and wanted to offer, that had already spoken in the first and wanted to speak again in the second, and to me that caused confusion. So to me it's either, I would prefer either, let's just figure out where the best place for public comment is and have it, and if it, I don't think we want to cut people off, and if we're going to offer everybody their chance to speak anyway, which I support, let's just have the time, whether if it's before our topic's great, if it's after our topic's great, but I would prefer just to have public comment at whatever point we choose and get it and have it done and accept everyone's comment.
Just as a point of information, if we are voting on an issue, there is additional public comment. So anything that we're voting on, they will have an opportunity to speak to those issues.
And I understand. It's just the way it worked at the last meeting, it caused some confusion.
Madam Chair, I would defend my 20-minute time frame to it deals with a hypothetical that says there is an organized attempt to basically filibuster, which could be 2 hours of public comment, and some of us, as probably you've seen in your experience, that happens. This limits to 20 minutes, and if you'll recall, we didn't need 20 minutes last time. I don't think we've needed 20 minutes in any of our meetings. So my motion stands as is, and it has a second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion. Okay. The motion still carries. All right. So I will also, yes, Richard. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yes. So we have produced speaker cards, which I think will help all of us to have some idea as to who wants to speak, and it'll give us a time frame. So if you know that you want to speak during the public comment section, which is going to be after monthly progress and fiscal reports, please get a speaker card and turn it into Carol. All right, they're pink, they're up here. They look like this.
Does that apply also to comments on motions?
Yes, this month we happen to have no motions unless we
Okay.
decide to bring some. There's none on the agenda. But yes, it would. It would apply to any public speaking, anything, because it asks you for the agenda number, what you would like to speak under. All right. And I just wanted to remind that 3 minutes, when we get to that point, I'll remind again that keep your comments to the 3-minute limit. Thank you. And you may speak once. All right. I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from our previous meeting.
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second? All right. Thank you. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Virginia.
Okay. Well, the last month has continued to be busy preparing the septic moratorium and going through the public hearings for that. So 3 out of 4 public hearings have taken place. The 4th before the county commission is May 22nd, and you have the ordinance the board is considering. There, after your packet was put together, there were a couple changes that were proposed after taking comments from industry in some of the earlier public meetings. And so in the definition of shoreline, we've added a top of bank option so that in the field for quick determination of whether they're in the ballpark of the moratorium area or not, they can use that. And if they're really close, then they'll need to go through the effort of the proper shoreline survey. But if they're not close, then that's an easy approximation. Also, in the exemptions section, there was previously an exemption for anyone who already had a septic permit or had submitted a complete application for a septic permit. We've now added that folks who have signed a contract with a home builder and have already paid their initial fees to the home builder, before the moratorium takes effect, they would also be grandfathered in.
Virginia, the fundamental reason for having a moratorium is to give time for staff to develop long-term plans?
Yes, that's the purpose of the 150-day moratorium.
This is a very good news. I'm very proud of the county commission for doing this. They're awesome.
Okay. We've also been working on our budget for next fiscal year and have the draft submitted to the budget office. We've done all the mid-year changes for this year, and those are incorporated into the monthly financial statement that's in your packet. We took the sewage discharge data summary that included all the municipal responses, and we added the county utility responses as well. Several meetings back, you had asked what we were doing in the way of coordinating with the federal properties, and at the last monthly meeting, I reported that we had met with the Air Force. This last month, we met with NASA, and next is going to be Space Florida. So we're working with our federal partners, and they are interested in how they can help. Then also in your packet is a logo that the TDC's resources put together for us. So it's consistent with a whole pattern of logos that the Tourist Development Office is developing for multiple programs. So the space plane is sort of a, this is Brevard, this is the Space Coast. Consistent imagery between all of those logos, and then the bottom half of the logo and the Lagoon life is ours, specific to us. So we're excited to have that.
Were they looking for feedback on that, or was that just, this is what we have?
We've gone a few rounds, so if you have a real objection to it, we haven't produced it anywhere yet, but we'd really like to have a logo.
I have absolutely no artistic ability. None at all. I mean, white walls are fine with me. But there's no fish in there. And so, you know, the license plate with the fish on it.
Yes.
And anyway.
It also has an extinct species in it, the space shuttle. Perhaps you might find something else.
So we commented on both the lack of fish and the space shuttle, and I was informed that this is the next generation of space plane.
It looks like the last generation of space plane. Okay.
Put a Falcon 9 on.
The muck dredging master permit meeting, what results or what progress was made on the master permit meeting with USFW?
Are we finished with the...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are we finished with the...
No.
I just had a question on, is the Lagoon Life hashtag, is that what we're going to be using instead of the Save Our Lagoon one? Like, when we do anything for posting for this, or anything else? Is that the intent?
So they came up with that hashtag. Yeah, tourist development came up with that hashtag. We've started using it, and we're using both currently.
Okay.
We'll decide whether we're going to drop one and just go with the other.
Okay. And I don't have a comment either way, I just wanted to know, and I think, you know, just to let everybody know, my sustainability board, took how long? A year to come up with their logo. 8 months, because everybody had something to say about it. So.
And there is a fish in there.
Don't go there.
The seahorse is a
Seahorse,
fish.
yeah.
Just not a game fish.
Yeah.
Everybody has an opinion. It would take forever if we go there. So whatever you guys do is good with me.
It does not work.
Yeah.
What is the role of the committee in this? Is this a staff effort or committee effort? Are we kibitzing or approving or what?
Yeah,
What would be your preference?
I don't think that oversight really requires your input on logo.
Excellent.
I appreciate your input, and we want it to be a pleasing logo that people identify with, and Vinny's been working on ideas too, and so we appreciate
It's very
your
pretty.
input.
I like it.
All right. John, you had,
Yeah, so what was the results or progress with the master permit meeting?
you want to?
So we met with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and FWC. Predominantly, their focus is going to be on manatees. And we are trying to get a handle on categorizing the different dredge projects based on the geographic location in the lagoon, and also these warm water aggregation areas, as well as what's the other term that they use, in the Tier 1 map that Army Corps had.
Yeah.
There's certain areas where it'll either require consultation with the regulatory agencies, or it'll require some closure as a result of seasonal habits of the manatees. So we're just trying to get our arms around where's the low-hanging fruit? Where's the quickest path forward with these muck removal projects as they fall within these regulatory, these more strict areas, and some areas in the open lagoon where it'll be much easier for us to move forward with getting a permit to do these dredge projects.
Yeah, so the good news is that the manatees tend to prefer the channels and the tributaries, and they spend less time out in the open water, and they particularly don't have a lot of interest in the large muck pits out in the open lagoon, where there is no seagrass, there's nothing. So we're in the process of working on maps of what our high priorities are that we think would not trip the threshold for manatee concerns. We'll be sending them that map to have them confirm that. If that's true, then we would be working with the Corps and DEP to include those areas in the Phase 1 programmatic. This is the easiest sites to get started on.
Madam Chairman, I would suggest that one of the things that has to be factored into the discussion is the fact that if we don't clean up the river, if we don't get the muck out, there's not going to be any seagrass. If there isn't any seagrass, there aren't going to be any manatees. that long-term picture has to bear on this short-term, oh my goodness, don't hurt a man.
Absolutely. So, one of the things we talked about was the upper reaches of the Banana River have historically been very popular with manatees. And so they have loads of restrictions up there on what you can and can't do and when you can do it. And I said, well, but right now, because there is no seagrass, there's like 1/10 as many manatees as usual. So maybe it makes more sense to speed up the permitting, to go ahead and clean up that area first while manatees have, gone to Mosquito Lagoon to find seagrass. So we definitely had that discussion as well.
So I thought this had to do more with the Corps. So these meetings are prior to going to the Corps for a master permit?
No, we've already been to the Corps. The Corps is extremely supportive, but they have to do NEPA coordination. They have to coordinate with these other agencies. And so until we've figured out how to satisfy all the other federal agencies that they have to consult with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Previously, we brought you a report on the you had requested a more comprehensive report on what are the pollution sources that are being addressed by the Lagoon plan versus what are the pollution sources being addressed by utilities, anything else out there. We are working on that, and Courtney Barker has volunteered to work with the cities to try to get their input in there as well. So hopefully we'll have that back to you at the next meeting.
We just need like a common spreadsheet. That's the only thing that helps them figure out what we want exactly. So have you guys come up with that, or do you want me to come up with that? Or
No, we have taken something that we got from a concerned citizen and expanded it, and filled in everything that we could fill in. We sent it to utilities a couple weeks ago, and they were going to share it with you. So I thought that had happened already. My apologies.
That's okay. I'll get it from them.
Okay.
I mean, we have plenty of time to fill that in. So.
We've been working on developing our homeowner grants program for the septic to sewer projects, the lateral repairs, and septic upgrades. We've been through many attempts at exactly what's the best way to reimburse these folks, and it looks like a grant program is the best tool. And so I think we're very close to having that nailed down and ready to push out the door. The MIMS muck dredging.
So they're still working on the in-water work, conducting the dredging. They ran into a couple mechanical issues and some other various delays. So it looks like the schedule's been pushed back for completion of the in-water work. Previously it was June 1st. Now it looks like it's going to be somewhere about June 15th.
And on the outflow, we did put in some kind of an additional nitrogen. If there's an opportunity, if we could get photos of that and post them to social media, because there were a lot of pictures of the stuff that was done in Cocoa Beach years ago where water was just flowing back in. So if we could show people what this additional system is, I think it would be positively received.
That's great. And, we've had a couple attempts at shooting video of the project, and it's been rained out. So that's still high on our agenda. We're trying to get that done as soon as possible. Quick before they finish the dredging. But we'll make sure to show the clean outflow water. We're also working on a story map for all the lagoon projects that would go onto the website so that people could see what's in their area, or look at all the different places of different project types. And then we've been busy planning Waterfest, which is tomorrow. Encourage you to drop by Kiwanis Park. We're going to have lots of show and tell, including this gizmo over here that will be explained to you later during presentations. And we have these algae that are commonly found in the lagoon these days, to show people the difference in size classes of what we're dealing with, sort of the problem with the less than ideal algae versus the larger forms that are part of the normal food web that we appreciate. On the back side, I just wanted to highlight that Dr. Windsor presented at the Florida Today Indian River Lagoon event on May 9th and entertained lots of speed dating attendees. Did you want to say anything?
I got 7 dates after this. No. Yeah, one of the things that I found interesting was that people who normally don't get a chance to ask a question because they're a little bit laid back, in these small groups, they're able to ask the questions they're interested in. So we had a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussion. I also found by the 5th group, I was totally exhausted. I didn't think it would be as exhausting, but it is very exhausting to rotate around to the 5 groups and do the same thing. I tried to make a point with them all, and I gave it in my summary comments, that as of that meeting, no one in the public has contacted me and asked me about anything this committee is doing or making any recommendations to me. And I said, please, if you have some concerns or some issues you want to bring up, please contact me. And they said, well, how do we do that? And I had a sheet for them that showed them how to get to the website for the county, and our contact information is there. But it's really important because a question I heard, a comment I heard several times, is we've yielded our rights as citizens to this committee, and either you guys have stabbed us in the back or you guys have done something terrible to us. And I said, no, we haven't taken your rights away. We want to hear from you all. And I heard after that meeting, I did hear from one person. So I'm up to 1 now for general public comment, and I'm going to have a thermometer for myself, like Debbie's thermometer. How many people contact me? I'm up to 1, so that's a pretty good increase. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of upcoming volunteer opportunities, it's that time of the year, so we have a rain barrel workshop going on in MIMS tomorrow, in addition to Waterfest. If people are interested in the oyster work, there's they can sign up for oyster gardening workshops and become an oyster gardener, or just sign up for reef building. And Keep Brevard Beautiful is always looking for people who would like to assist with fish kill cleanup if that unfortunate event happens. And we have just contracted, or we're working on a task order for more muck finder work. So if people want to volunteer with Marine Resources Council to help map muck, that contact information is there as well. For future topics for special presentations, we had talked about the next meeting being the sewer discussion with the municipalities. I would really like to take the month of June off again, like we did last year. I have a conflict, and Christine Valier also may have a court date, and so we can push forward, but
I move that we bag the June meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Danielle, did you have discussion?
I thought that we were getting a presentation from Dwayne DeFries, Dr. DeFries, about flushing the lagoon next month. I thought that we talked about this month, and I thought it was being pushed to next month because they concluded their study this month.
I'm not sure. I mean, I was just meeting with the port yesterday that funded most of that work, and they have not seen the report yet. So I'm not sure that it is done yet. It may be done by next month.
When you speak about people asking you, I'm asked about that all the time. So I think if that can be presented next month, I think that we should consider having a meeting, because I'm kind of bombarded on social media about that. Okay.
There's, early on, before we actually got off the ground, you and I Virginia had a discussion about the ongoing research topics and what mechanism we might use to keep the committee informed of what those were. And this is just one of, I think, a dozen or so topics of interesting research that's being done. And if the results of that are published anywhere where we can get access to it, I don't know how to do it. So I think it would help all of us to get maybe a broader exposure to the things that are going on.
Point of order, we have a motion on the floor.
Sorry, I
John.
thought we were having discussion.
We-
Motion?
I'm lost now.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to suspend the meeting for June.
Cancel.
Right, cancel.
Okay,
And so,
I think Danielle suggested we should have the meeting.
if
yeah,
Dr.
and
DeFreeze's
then
report,
Terry was following up on that, so I'm not sure it's out of the loop. But
do we know if Dr. DeFreeze's,
I don't know. I know he's out of town this week, but we can confirm, actually, can somebody text him? Thank you.
While you're checking, if I could, I don't recall that conversation. My recollection was originally we're thinking about June as the big meeting about sewage. And that's what I've been telling people, is that the meeting in June would be about sewage.
And he followed up with something about, well, we're talking about flushing, and made a joke out of it at the last meeting.
is
Yeah, I think, and we talked about him coming back as quickly as possible. I don't know, I don't recall that it was set for June, but it was certainly, the discussion was him, as soon as he had that report, to get back in front of us as quick as possible. So I don't know when that is, but
Madam
that
Chair,
was...
Is it possible to accommodate the absences with a change in the June date rather than a cancellation? Move it to a different Friday, move it to a different day of the week, get the room or another room. Is that the meeting we have to change our venue?
No, it's the following
Okay.
month that we have to change the venue.
Is there an alternate date in June that could accommodate a meeting without without the problems that you've described?
I couldn't begin to answer that
They
question.
have to find this room.
right,
You know, the only, I mean, it would be great, because we're also, the county and all the cities are doing budget at that time, too, so it would be awesome not to have a meeting, but if he can make that meeting,
Is it possible,
yeah, that might be
if
it.
that report is done, is it possible that he could do that presentation in a video format that could be published so that the public could see it and that we could see it without having to meet in June and impose a problem upon staff and staff attorneys and budgeting at the city?
One of my staff members contacted him, and he won't be available in June.
Okay.
That
So
answers
so
that.
we'll work with him on what options we have, whether we bring him in July, and that would be a very long meeting to do both
sewage.
sewage and circulation.
Well, even if we
But-
did, if we did just a presentation, if you came and just brought it and said it's done, here it is, and then we'll talk about it next month, even if you did that.
Or share the report.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, share the
Yeah.
report rather than trying to have them present on it that month.
Yeah, and we can share the report as soon as it's available. We don't have to wait for a meeting for
That
that.
would be great.
Yeah.
All right.
So
I get the
the
same.
motion is back on the table.
It's still on
It
the
hadn't
table.
left.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of canceling June's meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So the only other thing in my report is the financials. So we've now received just over $50 million, and you'll see the actuals, the purple line, are tracking extremely closely to our revised projection in blue. So we're on target for what is in the revised budget.
Yes.
Virginia, backing up, the initial analysis from the vacuum head At Turkey Creek dredging, do we have any information on that yet?
I reached out to Dr. Zarilla. He's running the analysis on that. Last week, he said he should have it sometime this week. Well, this week has come to a close, so obviously we don't have it, but I expect it relatively quickly.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
You mentioned that Brandon is putting together a tracking document for existing projects, and he was kind enough to show me the first look at it at your request this morning. I think it's awesome. It needs to be populated, and I think there's a parallel document that needs to be a permanent part of what we have available to citizens, and that's just simply probably two timelines. One says somebody bought something and created a sales tax dollar, and here is the funding line that finally ends up with that dollar in the hands of somebody who's going to do work. That involves projects and project plans and budgets and commissions and interlocal agreements, et cetera. And the second line that runs along with it is the acquisition line that says, we got a dollar, we want to spend it on this, and that has to do with project creation and design and RFPs, interlocal agreements, the award process, contracting, and permitting, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And each of those two timelines with milestones marching across in time has listed under it the various entities and agencies and county departments, et cetera, who have to chop on this or have authority over it. Now, if we had a day-long workshop, this group could probably cobble that together. But it is a complex subject. I think it falls onto the staff to create that. And I would suggest that it would be useful if both those documents, both the overview that says this is what life looks like if you're spending sales tax dollars on Lagoon, and this is where that spending is being applied right now on an approved basis, because we keep running into social media and comments and so on that says, we approved the sales tax, why ain't the Lagoon fixed? That's a legitimate question. This is part of the answer. So I would hope to see that perhaps in July, if that's a useful thing from your viewpoint.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, with the rain inundations, what are we anticipating? I know that's a problem and leads to the fish kills, so are there any reads on the algae levels and any updates on that?
We've had some scary nights in the last week to 10 days. The last 3 days have been a little better. When the sun breaks through between the thunder showers, those days are better. I don't think we've seen impacts of runoff bringing in more nutrients, feeding the blooms. The combination of not a lot of sunlight is maybe offsetting that. So we're not seeing the blooms expand, but we are seeing the low DO problems in the evenings.
All right. Any further comments? Then we will move to public comment. Again, for anyone that came in late, we do have public comment cards. They're pink. They're up here at the table. So if you would like to speak under this public comment section, please fill out a card and give it to Carol.
We have Pamela Sale. I have a speaker card for Pamela Sale.
Hi, I'm Pamela Sal. Can you hear me? Is that coming through?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Pamela Sal, Vieira resident, and Ms. Barker knows my subject as it pertains to the lagoon. I'm at various times an animal welfare advocate, and there is, since this last animal ordinance change, we are going to have more and more feral cats in the community and in the county. The cats distribute a parasite, though it's really more of an invasive organism, called Toxoplasma gondii. It spreads oocysts. It's infective to humans. It's in the lagoon. Even though it starts on land, it goes through streams and out to the lagoon. And we know this because the dolphin are infected with it. There was a study done with dolphin from '04 to '07, and they found an infective rate of 15.2%. I think that there should be, at the minimum, some kind of warning to women who are entering the lagoon. It's not just a danger to women, but it kills fetuses and maims fetuses. This parasite does. That's the minimum. It's not a benign infection for any human. They are finding more and more evidence it affects your mental capacity as well as many other organs in your body. There is no cure for this organism because it's microscopic. They can treat an infection or an outbreak from it. But anyway, I've spoken to this many, many, many times to the county commissioners, and this last animal ordinance change basically allows us to have cats anywhere anyone wants to feed a cat. We can have them in this county. There is only one city in this county where they are illegal, Indian Harbor Beach. And I think I would like for this body, because it does go into the lagoon, I will not put a toe in the lagoon. I wouldn't let any of my loved ones near the lagoon. At first they didn't know how the dolphin were getting it, and now from all the evidence I've read, they think it comes through their blowholes when they go in and out of the water, because this oocyst that this is distributed by floats on water. It lasts a long time. It can live for up to 2 years in salt water. It can last even longer in fresh water. Florida is pretty much the most pristine environment for this parasite to exist. It can exist in land up to 54 months. Anyway, I would like to see y'all do something about it, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
Can I just add, are there reports of human infection?
Yeah, they do not report it in this state. So when a county commissioner produces a letter from the Florida Department of Health and he says there's no reported cases, that's because it's not required to be reported. Other states do report it. I know Georgia reports it. And you know, I don't know if y'all know, but a lot of time women go to their doctors and have a miscarriage and they don't know, they're not required to test for it. They say, well, you know, we don't know why you lost the baby. This could be one of the reasons.
Okay, I have another speaker card for George Rosenfield.
My name is George Rosenfield. I'm an environmental scientist, retired. Next week at the county commission meeting, I'm going to read something, a minute and a half, that pertains to this, and also I have something else for a minute and a half. Thank you in advance for passing the 5-month septic tank moratorium. I hope my previous presentations to the Citizens Oversight Committee, Transportation Planning Office, and this commission had some influence on your decision. This will give some breathing space for considering the sewage infrastructure problem and also the connection, improvement, and building of sewer treatment plants. The 5-row house home that I was raised in was more than 120 years old when my mother sold it. Never had a sewage problem. I don't know where the pipes led to, but they never needed repair or replacement during all those years. Maybe if the job had been done right here in Florida, we wouldn't have these problems now. Also, maybe the $10 million in excess tax money collected could be allocated toward fixing the present sewage infrastructure problem. Improving and building sewer treatment plants should be at the expense of the developers building homes for the expanding populations. Have we ever replaced the stalled impact fees? Maybe they should be increased. Thank you. I also have, the writer in yesterday's paper is wrong. The persons on the Citizens Oversight Committee represent the people of the county, not scientists. The science is very well provided by Virginia Barker and her well-qualified staff. I've spoken to some of them. She is well-founded in environmental science with her MS degree from Duke University. That is where I was supposed to go for mine. My college, UMass Forestry, had an agreement with Duke. If they sent you, Duke accepted you. I had personal reasons for not going there. I was changing careers from combat engineer unit leader to environmental scientist, and at age 30 cannot give up the extra year that Duke required. My school was mad at me. Today's paper had a well-presented letter from Leslie Malone, member of the Indian River Lagoon Coalition, that I also follow. She is also the local science Sierra Club chapter. Thank you.
Do we have any other
We have no
public comment cards? All right, thank you for your comments. And we will move into other reports and special presentations.
All right, while we get started on that, I just want to make sure everyone's aware that we're coming up on the Florida rainy season. Look outside the window, you know we're in the rainy season. That's why there is a summer ban, is to avoid placement of fertilizer that then gets washed off by a summer thunder shower. So where's our...
Ms. Barker?
Yes.
While there's a ban on the use of fertilizers starting June 1st, so we ought to have started last week, is there also a ban on the use of herbicides during that same time frame?
No, the ban is only on nitrogen and phosphorus.
So, okay.
All right, Steve, the floor is yours.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Krzyston, and for the last 18 years I've worked at Rockledge Gardens. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. And for the last 15 years I've been the information specialist there. And we now just recently added another one, bug specialist, Amanda. I've been asked to talk about the challenges that the fertilizer ban presents to retail business. And I have to say, after consulting with my boss, Kevin Riley, owner of one of the owners of Rockledge Gardens, that we don't feel it presents that much of a challenge. For many, many years, we've carried the Espoma brands of fertilizer, which is the oldest American all-natural fertilizer company. And in the beginning, when we first had them, some of their fertilizers were all organic, some were all natural, and as you know, all natural basically means nothing. But they've taken great pains to make the rest of their fertilizers organic, and at this point, almost the entire range of Espoma products are organic. The only concern I have as a horticulturalist, because I am a certified horticulturalist with the FNGLA, is that fertilizer is fertilizer, whether it's organic or not. Sooner or later it breaks down and it ends up in the lagoon. So I think the more important consideration is to get our customers to use fertilizers properly. It shocks me, after 15 years of helping people in all sorts of ways at the information desk, the way fertilizer is considered and treated in this country. Most people, mostly it's men that apply the fertilizer, and I don't know if it's because men tend to not like to read directions. But fertilizer is most often haphazardly applied to the ground, either too little, too much, dumped. And one of the biggest challenges that we face at Rockledge Gardens, because we take these things seriously, is educating our customers to use them properly. I can't tell you how many times I've used the phrase, fertilizing is a science, not a guessing game. And it just seems old to me now, but I say it again and again and again. But more and more people do take it seriously, especially with the news that the lagoon is being poisoned and that fertilizer runoff is a major problem in many ways. So we have stocked the Espoma brand for many years, and with our other fertilizers, Kevin has always taken great pains in looking at the science of the fertilizers to see what they contained and how good they were. And we've long carried the Fertilome brand, which isn't available to the box stores. It's a southern company, and they're more geared to understanding our southern lawns and our poor soils. And we've long carried a product called Premium Lawn Fertilizer with iron and sulfur, which at one point, not too long ago, was quite highly recommended by the University of Florida as a very good fertilizer. I think I have the numbers here. It doesn't quite match what we have now. It's 16.48, so it's not too bad, but the good thing about it is that the pellets are homogenized, and that makes a big difference in the application of the fertilizer. The other biggest challenge that I think we face is that no matter how we feel about fertilizers, and in fact, I should tell you that last year was the first year Kevin refused to even stock fertilizer during the ban period, and we plan to do it again this year. And our money is mostly made from plants, and even if we were to make a lot more from fertilizer, it just doesn't pay to stock it. It just seems wrong to us. I'm not going to speak to the politics of our owners, the other people there, but at least in terms of the environment, I find the Rockledge Gardens owners, crew, and management to be very progressive when it comes to environmental concerns. So in addition to educating our customers into the proper way of using fertilizer and trying to guide them to using the better fertilizers, we also are definitely going to continue a ban of it during the period. What we have to consider, the biggest challenge we do face is what are we going to do in the future after the ban period? Because now we have to look at the rules that have been imposed in terms of the application of nitrogen in the soil, and most of our fertilizers are slow release and meet the requirements. But the fact that we cannot apply phosphorus unless there's a test. Many people are serious and are taking those tests. Personally, if I can add this has nothing to do with Rockledge Gardens because I'm sure they would agree with me. I was raised in the United States, but my father was very anti-lawns. He didn't like to mow, he didn't like grass, he didn't like fertilizer. And I think he passed it on to me. And I spent a lot of years outside of this country too. I think the biggest challenge that we all face here is the unfortunate American addiction to lawns. It's not something you see everywhere except here and among usually the rich in England. Everywhere else, people have more natural environments around their homes. So we do promote the use of ground covers, and especially native ground covers, as opposed to lawns. And I think that's something that should be considered. Just trying to deal with it by getting people to reduce fertilizer use or use fertilizer properly, I don't think it's enough. And again, I'm being very personal. Don't apply this to Rockledge Gardens. I try not to even say it there because I have to consider my position there. But I am so anti-lawn. I myself have rocks in the front, back, and side, and have no lawnmower or edger or weed whacker, don't fertilize lawn. And I find it horrible that we grow weeds to represent a lawn. Now, where I grew up, grass was beautiful. You could roll in it, you could sit in it, it was nice, but St. Augustine grass, where I come from, is considered a horrible weed. And here it's our number one lawn. I think it's, 87% of our lawns, and then most of the rest are, Bahia? A nicer grass, but still has its problems. So one of the problems that my customers also have is that they don't take a lot of the fertilizer rules seriously, because look what about the water rules that we've had imposed for the past number of years by the St. John's Water Management. There's a $70 fine, I believe, if it's still on the books, for every infringement of watering more than twice a week. And yet people water 5 times a week, 4 times a week, 3 times a week, think nothing of it. I educate a lot of people and get them to water less simply because it's killing their plants. When they realize they're putting so much water on, that's why there's fungus in the lawn and on the trees and the shrubs are dying, then I can convince them to reduce it. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get people to reduce their water use. And I think the reason people don't take the fertilizer ban so seriously is that the water ban is not enforced. Who's been fined? You know? People are even hesitant to turn in their neighbor for watering 5 times a week, even though it's hurting their plants. You know, I've talked to many people that say, what can I do? They want to grow shrubs to keep the water out or to put a fence up or something, but they're very hesitant to turn people in. So in terms of what we're going to do in the future, Kevin says we have to do a long, hard think this summer as to what we're going to do with fertilizer in the future, because the thing is our customers want a green lawn. And we still carry that fertilizer that was once highly recommended by the University of Florida. What do? Do we refuse to sell it to people unless they present us with a phosphorus test that was done? It's not our job to do that, you know. So we're going to just try to continue to provide the best fertilizers that we can find that get us. And we do. The Espoma brand does have a lawn fertilizer that has no phosphorus in it. We do carry it and do promote it. And I should add one other thing that we are very, very, very supportive of is the feed the soil, not the lawn, not the plants type program that's promoted by very highly by Sally Scalera and others at the Extension Service. Even in past history, we've seen that in the Amazon by the proper use of burn and char, these people built up a layer of soil that was incredible in an area where you shouldn't be able to grow, and yet they grew all kinds of fruits and vegetables in an area that was, you know, washed through by the Amazon, built up this layer over hundreds, if not a few thousands of years. And now what's happening? Brazil is selling it off as a soil to other countries. So I think we just have to look at the big picture, and as far as we're concerned, we're going to continue to look very closely at the fertilizers that we provide, continue to try to provide the best education we can to our customers in terms of fertilizer, how to use it, and alternative strategies like native ground covers, native plants. This is something we push very much. And as much as the biggest complaint that we've gotten recently was from native plant people. And it is true. It is one of the few weak areas in Rockledge Gardens where our native plant, we've always had a native plant section and we have a native plant handout, but I think we could do a much better job, and we've all agreed that we can do a better job of dealing with native plants and promoting them. So that's going to be very high on our list in terms of this consideration. And that's about it. Questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. And I'm interested to come see your lawn to see how I get from grass to rocks. I have a nephew moving to town, and he's just bought a home, and the lawn is in, you know, it needs something. In his plan, he showed me pictures of what he's thinking about, and it's native plants, it's rocks, it's gravel. So, you know, it's the needle's starting to move a little bit.
Yeah.
I had a presentation, the MRC Brown Bag, a couple of months ago from a native plant enthusiast that gave us a lot more information than I could consume. But one of the things that he said that sort of disturbed me was, if I convert to native plants, he said something on the order of 3 years of watering it daily to get it to, before I have to.
No.
So maybe I misunderstood that.
No, yes, I'm afraid you did.
Glad to hear that.
It only takes 8 weeks to establish just about any plant here in Florida in the heat. My best recommendations I give to people here is to water, and I have certain time limits that differ between the barrier islands and the mainland, but basically it's 8 weeks. You want to water every day for 2 weeks, every other day for 2 weeks, twice a week for 2 weeks on your sprinkler days, if you have a sprinkler, and then once a week for 2 weeks on one of the sprinkler days, and then you're done hand watering. If you don't have a sprinkler, then you water every day for 2 weeks, every other day for 2 weeks, and you just water twice a week after that. But it doesn't take long to. That's for any
That's
plant,
good to know.
not just
Thank
a
you.
native plant.
I just wanted to, I love the idea of having a Florida native lawn. In Indiana, where I live, we've actually had multiple code ordinance problems because people have ripped out their entire lawn and planted like sunshine mimosa or any other ground
And
cover.
what's wrong with that? That's a wonderful thing
I
to do.
completely agree, but the problem is that code enforcement has that you have to have
You're
a
right.
certain amount for erosion.
protection.
I
So
call them Nazis.
Yeah, so well, I won't go there, but I will say I think it's a great idea to turn your yard into a Florida native yard,
Yes,
but
sir.
check with your municipality or code enforcement to make sure that there aren't erosion rules and until that Florida native gets rooted.
I think one of the biggest problems are associations, neighborhood associations. The rules are draconian. They're often Nazis or communists or something, but they come, people, I deal with these people, I deal with people every day. I deal with about 1,000 people a week. And a lot of them are victims of the rules of their associations, where somebody said, oh, your bush is 6 inches too short from covering your air conditioner, or there's a patch in your lawn, and you can't have anything but a lawn. In basically all of Suntree and Vieira, you're doomed. You have to have a lawn. And if you try to do something different, like Sunshine Mimosa or something natural, you're not an outcast. You're out.
Maureen, did you have...
Sorry, I
Yeah,
tend
no,
to
I
be
just
a little-
wanted to say thank you for talking about the IFAS strategy of feeding the soil rather than plants.
Mhm.
Of course, I go to your classes all the time. I'm always at your info desk, but that strategy we've been using for a couple of years now. And so it really is an I feel like it's really an
is.
alternative
It really
to the
is.
fertilizer. It's helped the fruit trees.
Do you have earthworms
the
yet?
citrus. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the earthworms
So,
come
I mean,
back.
I really think long-term, it's a long-term strategy. People have to think long-term about their lawns.
It's probably the best strategy that we could go for. It
Yes.
is long-term, but it's going to have the best benefits. You reach the point where you don't even have to use fertilizers. That's amazing. Yes, sir.
First off, I want to applaud the decision to not sell fertilizers during the ban period of time. And I guess I have two questions. The first is, and even the big box stores, while they are selling it, are not promoting it, okay? But
I
there's
don't go there, so I don't.
Yeah, I know you don't, but there's still a lack of awareness among the general public that we're not allowed to use fertilizer because it is still on the shelf. And the fact you take it off the shelf, I think it's a great decision on your part. Do you get any pressure from the manufacturers to sell that product or during the summer?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That would be a Kevin question, because Kevin's tried to divest himself of a lot of stuff because he's the overall manager now, and his son-in-law is an excellent manager. But he's gone back to buying the hard goods again. So I'd have to ask him, but I don't think so. Kevin puts in a separate order with a company we dealt with for years, and I know the representative personally. I've dealt with him for years, a very nice man, and they're very aware of what we're doing, and no, they don't pressure us.
Okay, and the second question, and this, there was discussion among this group a year ago about well water that's used to water our lawns and trees, etc., and that it may have certain amounts of nitrogen in it to the levels that one doesn't even need to fertilize. And we looked into, was there a way to do an inexpensive little kit that people could use at home, and gave up on the idea. But if I were to bring my well water in to Rockledge Gardens, and I know you can tell me how much salt's in it.
That's all we test for. That's all we can test for.
Okay. Yeah.
We can explore other things. It would depend on the cost. I'll certainly bring it up with Kevin.
If there's a way that persons could come to a central location, whether it be a private business or a county or whatever, and have their well water tested to see if there's nitrogen. Because quite obviously, we've had a lot of rain this week, and all you have to do is walk out front, and everything is green. And I don't know if it's green because of the water, if it's green because of nitrogen deposition, which is a major cause of nitrogen in the lagoon during the summertime. But it would be interesting to know.
Well, I'll tell you this. I've grown 4 types of bananas for about 20 years now in Port St. John. And I can water them till the cows come home, and they do fine. But when it rains, it's like they grow a foot in a week.
Well,
Rainwater does amazing things for my bananas, at least.
Yeah, no, and anecdotally, people that collect rainwater in barrels
Which I
and
do.
use it on their vegetable gardens
very
get
good.
better results than using fertilizers or plain water.
I
So,
certainly agree with that. I should add that Rockledge Gardens hosts the county about 4 times a year to do rain barrel workshops. We've done it for years. Most of us have rain barrels at home. I've had one since 1997, I think I bought it from the Vermont company. It's a beautiful one. 76 gallons. I'm really proud of it.
Mine are blue, they're really cheap, and they're all over the yard, and they work.
I
And they're
spent
overflowing right now.
$110, but I got a 76 Hunter Green water barrel.
Thank you, Steve, for your presentation. I saw you in the back of the room, and I said, who's that guy? I know him, and I realized you're the guy that tries to cure my brown thumb whenever I come in. Thank you. This, I think, flows out of a conversation we had a couple meetings ago that says, let's talk to the fertilizer folks about what they're doing to help the lagoon. Great pitch. When will we see Lowe's, Ace, and Home Depot? If we had, not to you.
I want to add something very quickly, though. Kevin, it's a point I forgot. Kevin reminded me to tell you all. Kevin intends to talk to our fertilizer people to see what they can do about meeting Florida standards. And that would be the Fertilum Company. They're the biggest supplier of southern stuff. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
And Virginia, when will we see these other cats to give a comparably wonderful pitch?
You know, we reached out to them very briefly, and there wasn't an overwhelming, I think, you know, we've now set the bar. And so our hope is that now they want some attention too, and will be more inclined to come talk to us.
If you need help beating them up, let me know.
And Virginia, last year, and maybe MRC can comment, there were educational brochures that were being distributed at places that sell fertilizer that explained you can only use no phosphorus, slow release, when the ban was. And I know those were at least honored in the big box stores in my community.
We need to copies of them.
Was that effort made again this year, or is it being made again this year so that consumers, particularly new people to Brevard County that aren't aware of this, when they go in to buy fertilizer, can see a thing that says this is the only kind you should buy and when you can't buy it?
Lisa here, she was distributing those at the open mic event 2 weeks ago, so I believe the answer is yes, but I'm not sure. We can find out.
I know we still have a lot printed. I'm not sure that there's been a plan to distribute them like we did last year at all the retailers, but I do know that we still have a lot printed, and we can get them in the hands of retailers if we need to.
Yeah, if you could. I mean, we got 12 days left, and it would be a good time to remind them. Because I have found that the managers at those stores are aware of this and to the best of their ability discourage people from buying, but they're under pressure to sell.
Brandon, do you know if you have any of those brochures to hand out Saturday morning?
We do not. MRC is supposed to be there.
Maybe we can just make sure that we get some of those up there. That's
At
a good
Waterfest?
venue. At Waterfest, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brittany had a question.
No, it's just a comment. I was just going to say it's going to be a lot harder for us to get the big box stores to do stuff like what Rockledge Gardens is doing. Just because, you know, they have a corporate structure that Rockledge Gardens just doesn't have, and they, you know, so our community garden centers are going to be the ones that are able to respond quickly, and they also have more of a, you know, a dog in the fight, if you will, because they live here, you know, so.
I will say that the big box stores, though, they do try to project that they are community,
Right.
you know, components. So I think that that's definitely an area we can hang a sign or two on.
Right.
Or a John or two on.
Yeah.
All right, while Brandon gets this next presentation pulled up, I'm very happy that Stephen brought up the problem of over-irrigating. And so this next presentation is about a new product that helps reduce that problem. And hopefully we're there soon. This is Rich Dunkel.
Telling me the USB drive is not recognized.
Try the other slot.
I don't think so.
Close that and open it back.
Unless it was it's supposed to be included in there.
Just not seeing it.
Demonstrate once again that Bill Gates is
She did talk about this. She talked about the track.
See if anything else drops down. No, I'm done.
Jimmy, do you want me to take a look?
Bring in the expert. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not recognizing it. Any tricks?
Yeah. A few, maybe.
Some of the stuff is the same.
Right.
$60 million difference. Right? So where is the Virginia?
Yes. You want to talk about that?
Love to, and we have a copy of the 2017 version. There's a $60 million delta. I'd like to see where the delta expenses are.
Between 320 and 380?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the combination of the...
Yeah, no, I know what it is. I wanted to see where it broke down within the new project cost, where we allocated the money.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yes. Yeah, so we can do a side-by-side and a difference in the
Yeah.
same format?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a sense, how did we shift our priorities, and were they shifted in response to some of the community's suggestions, or whatever?
Right. We did the pie charts to show that the distribution was roughly similar.
Right.
But we can show how it's different.
Yeah.
Or survival too, but some sort, so if you go underwater, you can.
That's not working. So why don't we try the next one to make sure it's not a thumb drive?
That's another.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll take advantage of this and offer a 10-minute break.
Those Facebook people come to a meeting and public don't. The messages have to go out via Facebook.
We're ready to get started?
In red shirt? Yeah, he was at the wastewater treatment.
In order to accommodate the technical difficulties that we have had, we are going to change the order of the presentations. And I would like to invite Bill Buckman and Morris Smith as our next presenters.
How you all doing today?
Do we need to give Mike or?
Yes.
And somebody, please.
Good morning, I'm Morris Smith. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Florida and a licensed professional land surveyor. Bill?
My name's Bill Buckman. I'm a state of Florida septic contractor for 25 years. I've been at it for a long time. In the beginning, back 20...
Yeah. Because this is recorded for the public and on television, thank you.
Yes, sir. In the beginning, back years ago, when I started in the septic system, there was very little rules, if any. We did a lot of things that would be crazy today. Also, it would kind of be illegal, and we'd have real big problems. So it's been a transition. But then somewhere around 2003, we started, me and Morris, working together as far as trying to do things. We seen in the beginning septic systems as a solution, not the problem. We thought that septic systems would come along and come up to speed, and we'd be able to do things with mini sewer plants on every house that would give us the things that we need. And drip irrigation came out years ago. It was designed in Israel, which in Israel they fertilized the desert. And I just heard the fertilizer guy soon before me talk about having to fertilize the root zones, the soil, not the surface, which makes perfect sense, because when you put it underneath the ground, it doesn't run off in the rivers and the streams and get out into contaminate the river because it's put in the dirt. And so the roots eat from the dirt, they don't eat from the top. But yet we go out and we blow it all over the top, and the first thunderstorm it goes in the rivers and the ditches and the canals. So if you went with the drip tubes that was designed in Israel to fertilize the desert, which they're the leading exporter of fruits and vegetables that has come out of their ability to fertilize the roots as opposed to the top of the soils, and that made the desert bloom. So as we've gone through this, back in 2003, we started putting in advanced secondary drip systems, aerobic systems that would reduce the nitrogens and phosphate. Originally, it wasn't so much focused on the nitrogens and stuff as was cleaning up the sewage. And it's been a process till today. But yes, we believe we can reach the 65% reduction through the process of the mini sewer plants in every house. And I always seem to get to the point to where everybody has an air conditioner, so everybody could have a mini sewer plant. And when you're dealing with it at that point, your average home has 2 people living in it. It's 50 gallons a day per person. So now you have 100 gallons a day you're dealing with. You're not dealing with mass quantities. You could put it through drip tubes, and we could run the one drip tube around the house and just water the flower beds that everybody wants up, or hedges up against the house, and they would eat the rest of the nitrogen out on the top, and we would have very little impact. So that's kind of, I want to just open with that a little bit. And Morris came along, he has slideshows to show you, and everybody's been given a piece of drip tube. And if you look at the drip tube, there's an emitter in the middle of the tube. That emitter drips very little water. It's like a tear duct. So it just slowly drips, so the water never really leaves the surface too fast. It's not a jet that comes out. So your roots have plenty of time to eat and drink and be fertilized underneath 6 inches of dirt so it doesn't wash off. All right, Morris?
Thank you. The state of Florida is telling you all right now that that 1 foot section of drip tubing is 2 square feet of a drain field. And you design the septic systems based on the gallons per day. They have a table in their code, it's Florida Administrative Code 64E6. That specifies how many gallons per day they expect a single-family residence based on bedrooms, up to 4 bedrooms and 3,300 square feet. Then it gets into some tricky math to calculate the rest of it. But if you had a 300 gallons per day septic system, you would use 150 feet of the drip tubing. The drip tubing and the performance-based standards, which is up the highest level of an aerobic treatment unit, that the state of Florida likes them so much that you not only do you get a 50% increase in the water flows for your house design, but it also, they allow us a 40% reduction in the size of the drain field. The drain fields are almost half as much as required because you're processing the water so well. Typically, the wastewater that leaves the aerobic treatment units, the performance-based treatment units, is better than swimming pool quality water, in particular because it doesn't have any chlorine in it. The standards have been around since 1983. This is not something new that's smoke and mirrors. It's always a situation of codes trying to catch up with technology. Technology seems to always be out front, and that's appropriate. So the choice of the commission to begin to look at, for the moratorium to bring in only aerobic treatment units, for you all who do calisthenics and jumping jacks, aerobic exercises are when we do jumping jacks and you're sucking oxygen into your lungs. Anaerobic is just the opposite. It's the dark, quiet time, and there's no oxygen involved in the process. The typical, and Bill and I have worked with 5 or 6 different manufacturers of performance-based treatment systems. They all have to be approved by the state of Florida. They have to meet the advanced secondary standards, which is 10 milligrams per liter or less of CBOD5, 10 milligrams milligrams per liter less of total suspended solids, total phosphates, total nitrates all have to be reduced. So there's a matrix, and then they have to meet that matrix or the state of Florida won't approve them for service. In that process of approval, they approve the installers, like Bill Buckman, to be a maintenance entity. And it's required by the state law that for 2 years after it goes installed, the installer that's approved by the manufacturer has to be your maintenance entity for those 2 years. The engineer that designs the system sets the specifications for testing protocols for the different chemicals that are in the water, all the way down to fecal coliforms. If you get a reduction to the surface waters of the state of Florida, then you have to test for fecal coliforms. If you get an increase in the water flows, you also have to test for fecal coliforms. So it's not anything new, but our purpose today was just to come and let you see the things that we've been doing in Duval County, St. Johns County, Orange County, Seminole, Brevard, Indian River, St. Lucie, Martin, and Hernando. We have a project that was over in Brooksville years ago. So today was just to make ourselves available for our knowledge base for the last 15 years. 2002 or 2003 was the first project we put in here in Brevard County for Mrs. Klepper?
Yeah, Tanya Klepper.
Tanya Klepper. She was very concerned about living as close as she did to the river, and she has some horse stables, and she wanted to make sure everything was fine. I did learn a lesson there with the horses. They find a source of water, and they love to paw this stuff out of the ground, so we had to make sure that it was outside of their corrals, not anywhere near the horses. So we live and learn with these processes. What I'd like to do is step through the slideshow. I'm not going to read them. This slideshow is now on your all server, so it's a public record. Y'all can enjoy it as you need to. These are just some examples of how it can be done. Bill kind of alluded to the fact that the drip tubing, the state of Florida allows us to put the tubing within 2 feet of any compacted surface. That would be the house foundation, the edge of the driveways, the sidewalks to the front door, around the tennis courts, around the pool deck, around any area that's going to have a solid compacted surface. And then the drip tubing itself, we design it to be 2 feet apart. So on our show and tell board, the black loop, that's a 2-foot separation between the drip tubing. And I'm sure as technology loves to make a monkey out of us, as soon as we turn that on, probably everything I've talked about is going to fail because your guys are going, he can talk about it, but he can't make it work. In the design process to dispose of the effluent, the state of Florida, once again, has approved this particular product from the Netafim company. The drip emitter that looks like the tear duct, these are designed to drip 0.2 gallons per hour. That's key to think about. It's gallons per hour. If I took this piece, well, we'll use those 8 feet up there. If that was just hooked to a pump all by itself, and you put a milk jug under that, turned on the pump, came back an hour later, it wouldn't have filled up the milk jug. So it is moist, the soil is moistened. It's not saturated, it's not soaked. And that's what we wanted to show today, was kind of how it gets moistened. And my designs have been everything from a small house all the way up to my most recent approval from the state of Florida was 11,749 square foot home. The gentleman is a horticulturist as a hobbyist. When I told him we could water all the plants around the foundation of his house and the sidewalks in his courtyard as you arrived at the house with drip emitters and drip tubing, and that'll be the final polishing of his wastewater, that his plants can actually finish up the nitrogen and phosphorus removal. Because, as Bill said, the drip emitters are 6 inches or 9 inches in the ground, which is the root zone. He never questioned the price. He never said, how is this happening? How magic is this? He said, yep, that's exactly what I want to do. And the state of Florida, they never care if I over-design. I can be as conservative in my design as I want to. I have to meet a minimum. And in his case, his is a 1,200 gallon per day home. His ATU is 1,800 gallons per day. He needed 520 feet of drip tubing. But to cover the big walkway going to his house, 2 feet on each side, 2 runs, and then all around the courtyard of his home, it was 880 feet of drip tubing. So he's got 50% more than actually what he needed, and he's really excited that he didn't have to put any spray irrigation up near the house, because his wells, I'm sure, have got iron in them just like everyone else. The exciting thing about this is, especially for guys and developers that are on wells, is you're generating your reuse water at the point of extraction. You're pulling water out of the ground, you're processing it, you're drinking it, you're making turds and toilet paper with it, and then you process it there in your yard and you put it back in the ground. That's closing the loop, just like the the green logo, the triangle. That's a very closed loop, and it works well. On an aside for the gentleman that was talking about the fertilizer in our yards, I have a mentor named Paul Small who's in Virginia, but he moved to Cocoa for about 5 years. Paul has forgotten more about on-site wastewater than Bill and I know. First thing he did was he took his well that was in his yard, he put a pressure meter on it. He had 9 psi of piezometric pressure, just the water trying to get out of the ground. The wonderful thing about the drip tubing, those emitters began working at 7 psi. So he didn't have any side in his yard, he pulled it all up, he laid out a distribution line and a return line, and he laid his drip tubing down 1 foot apart instead of 2 feet apart, and just opened the valve on his well, and now he's watering his lawn with nothing but piezometric pressure groundwater, which is a great way to go. Once again, you're just applying water at the roots, not anywhere else. So if you'll indulge me, we'll go through the slideshow, and then we can have some conversation, hopefully. Which way to advance? Just
hit the cursor.
I would like to maybe bring up one more point. Morris, because just to show the heart that he has for this kind of stuff, he came up with an idea when we were working on a house that was down real close to the river, and he decided, okay, well, I think this will work, Bill. Let's put a greenhouse on the roof. There will be nothing going in the ground at all. It'll all go into the greenhouse. All of your septic drip tubes would be in the greenhouse, up evaporation. None would ever go into the ground. And so we decided at one of the committees, we were going to go out, he decided at one of the committees, he's going to go out and talk to him about how do we permit this. And basically we've got 2 answers. You can't. it doesn't go in the ground, so we're not permitting it. And the other one said, well, it's not over 5,000 gallons a day, we don't want to look at it. So that was years ago, back in the beginning of this. But that's the possibilities of what can be done going forward. We can do things that are going to fix the problem, not cause the problem.
The earlier statement, that's from the Florida Administrative Code. That's what their definitions are for performance-based systems and aerobic treatment units. In this situation, I know you were talking about the algae over here, but we look through our suspended solids, there's gravels, there's sands, silts, clays, and algae, and then all the effluent, you'll begin, well, not so much gravel unless you're that guy. So we do have sand, silts, and clays, and algae that get distributed throughout the effluent system. And the total suspended solids is just what you would think. If you put a tablespoon or so in a mason jar of just your soil, shake it up, immediately the heavy stuff falls out, and over days the silts and clay fall out. The algae is small enough, they're at 2 microns, they can hang around and float really well. To give you an idea of what 2 microns are, there's 100. A human hair is 100 microns. Slice this into 100 pieces, put 2 of them back together, and that's the size of some of these little algae models. A red blood cell is 5 microns, so that should give you an idea of how teeny these guys get. Biochemical oxygen demand is what's required in the water for the bugs to begin to process all the solids. And then there's dissolved oxygen that they need, and it talks about the depletion between what's used and what's required. The carbonaceous biochemical oxygen demand, that's one of the measures we're working on with the performance-based systems. That has to be less than or equal to 10 milligrams per liter. The state of Florida established that. These are, this is a design table. And what we're looking at in the very first column are the pollutants, CBOD5, TSS. Then we're looking at total nitrogen, total phosphorus, fecal coliforms, all the way out on the side. Then the reduced setbacks of what we have to surface waters, ground waters, dry retentions and swells, separations from the seasonal water table or wet season water table, and then increase or decreases or no increases in the allowable flows for your home. The first column is baseline system standards for septic tank effluents is 120 to 140 milligrams per liter of CBOD5. Total suspended solids are 65 to 175 milligrams per liter. In a standard system, you get no reductions in your drain fill. Total nitrogen, total phosphorus between 30 and 45 milligrams per liter and 6 and 10 milligrams per liter. And fecal coliforms are so rampant, they are too numerous to count. One of my favorite abbreviations, TNTC. Aerobic treatment systems, there, the blue column. The CBOD5 is less than 30 milligrams per liter. TSS is less than 30 milligrams per liter. And there you begin to get your reduction in the drain field. When you're using slightly limited soils, you'll get a 25% reduction in the drain field. Slightly limited soil is soils that have somewhat of a clay, more sand than clay, but some clay. The state of Florida stopped allowing us to use beach sand because the water percolates through it too fast. That was 1.2 gallons per day per square foot of soil. The best we allowed now to have is 0.8 gallons per square foot of soil per day. So now our design standards are based on 0.8. And slightly limited soil is just that. The beach sand, it just runs right through. The clay holds it in there. They want to retain some of the water because after 2 feet through the sand, the really bad bugs, the E. coli, Giardia spores, the bad bugs, they're all dead. They can't survive outside that saturated zone. There are no setbacks for surface waters, ground waters, dry retention swells. They're all still the same as per the code. If we'll jump over to the third column, or the orange column, It's advanced secondary treatment standards. That's what's set up for the performance-based systems. It's equal to or less than 10 milligrams per liter. For the CBOD5, 10 milligrams or less per liter of total suspended solids. In that column, we will get a 30 or 40% reduction in the drain fill size, total phosphorus, total nitrogen. You can read there through the side. The testing protocol for that work is probably $300, maybe $400 per year, as the homeowner has to test for all those to maintain their operating permit to have that in their yard. The advanced wastewater secondary standards comes up with some really great reductions. Problem is, it's about $6,000 to test that out for the first 5 years. Although I've got some very clients that don't care the cost of these systems, even they're kind of shocked to think they've got to pay $5,000 to test their water, or $6,000 for 5 years. So that's the standards that the state has in place. This is a project in town. The site plan's over here on the left-hand side. All the blue is the guy's property is surrounded on the north, the west, and the southeast with water. When he moved from his standard septic system, or he and his wife, to a performance-based system, the whole purpose was to double the size of their home, and they did. They put a full second floor on their house, probably tripled the value of the house via the process of doing the performance-based irrigation or drip. That's what it looks like from the ground. What we want to show today is what it's going to look like under the ground. That's with the pumps running. We're validating that all the emitters are working. And the way the design works, you take the number of emitters that's required. We calculate how many gallons per day, the 0.9 gallons per hour. And then because I've got hundreds and hundreds of emitters, the pump only runs for 3 or 4 minutes. The one for the 800 emitters is going to run for 7 minutes, an hour. So it'll run for 3 to 7 minutes and sit there and wait. And then it checks to see if there's any water in the pump tank, and the controller says, yep, we got some water to get rid of, and it pumps it down. So you're never saturating the soil. I tell you, Bill, why don't we go ahead and turn the pump on? Okay. Plug it in. Okay.
Just plug it in?
Sure, just plug it in. We'll run the pump, and you can get an idea. Yeah, it may be. It looks like a $10,000 moment with Funniest Home Videos.
You got this, Daniel?
What's that?
Wall plug won't work?
I'm going to close that.
Works better if you turn it on.
All right, so we'll watch this for about 5 minutes.
Like paint drying.
Yeah, exactly. You can't see this too well. No, it's not a big toilet. I just realized several months ago when I made this presentation. This was a courtyard in the house off the son's room. The little guy loved orange citrus trees, so they planted a lemon tree inside the courtyard, and we fed it water. More surface expansion. This was a project here on US 1 in Palm Shores. The blue is the Indian River Lagoon. The green is the right-of-way of the FDOT. And so here's the right-of-way on the west side. On this back slope is the drip tubing, and they put some type of plant through there that we specified. Septic system's down near the bottom of the house, but the drain field is on the back slope. We get to be really creative. The fun part about this is truly you get to design something. We're not just complying with stuff. We get to be as creative as we can. In this situation, it was a house down in Vero Beach on the Vero Beach Country Club. The house was built in the 20s. They wanted to refurb the house, couldn't do the refurb they wanted without updating their septic system. This is probably my favorite install because that's the front entry to the house. And 6 feet away is his drain field. Watch this. That's the side of the house. They're installing it. Guys are in the trenches. This is that courtyard. They're hand digging, hand removing, hand replacing the soil. There's the trench that they dug to put the drip tubing in. That's the drip. That's his drain field on the side of the house with ground cover. That's the entry to his house, and behind that little gate, there's his drain field. That's what we can do with the technology that the state's had in place for a long time. This is a project up on Lake Honeymoon. Lake Honeymoon's on the east, the river's on the west. The homeowner would not buy the lot until I handed him a septic tank permit, and then he closed and built this really large home. Drip field's going in. This is the most recent visit I had to the variance board. The variance board likes the process, the performance-based systems, because it does treat the water so well. You're supposed to stay 75 feet away from a drinking water well. Because of the hardship that this property had, that blue radius is 43 feet from the drinking water well. And what we've done in this situation is between the performance-based processor and the pump tank, there's a UV light that's burning up the bugs. This is a typical situation where you've got the performance-based processors there in the upper left corner. There's a controller up in the upper right corner with the red light. That's your alarm, and there's a buzzer that wakes you up at night because whatever's going on is wrong. Lower right corner is the pump that's used to pump the effluent to the drip tubing. Then the black poly tank there is a pump tank. And then the blower, the aerobic systems have to have a constant source of air. It's blowing all day long. They're small. They fit in the back of a pickup truck. The other tank is small. You can shove it around the ground. I'm using these systems a lot now because that system is 400 gallons per day for a 3-bedroom house that weighs 490 pounds. It's fiberglass. So getting it into really tight areas on the property, which is what's going to be required for all the retrofitting, is going to be small footprints. The poly tank can shove it around the ground as well. That's on VIP Island. That's what a drain field looks like. That's a drain field that's across the causeway into the south. I forget the name of the subdivision, but you can see the bright green stripes from the nitrogen and phosphorus. That's how obtrusive the lids are. There's the stripes. That's not Photoshop. That was about a month after it had been installed. Here was a creative site where we did a landscaping mound and ran the drip tubing through the mound. Malabar Mo's restaurant, they have a performance-based system. It was almost $75,000 to flush the toilets there, but he's now can have more. He went from 42 tables, I think, to 96 tables. 42 seats at his restaurant to 96 seats in his restaurant for that investment. He's up on the hill in Malabar, just west of the river, just west of US 1. That was it.
Cool.
The reason to be here is to share my knowledge with you all. So if you've got questions, please don't hesitate. If you want to contact me on my email, that'll be fine as well. Yes, sir.
Okay. I got 4, Morris.
Sure.
I'll try. So first, you use the term performance-based systems.
Correct.
And is that the same as an aerobic or anaerobic system, or is it completely different?
There's no treatment at all, standard wastewater, a standard just a septic system. The first level is an aerobic treatment unit, and there's 2 of those. There's one that meets the less than 30 or equal milligrams per liter for TSS CBOD5. The performance base, which is the high end of it, also is an aerobic treatment unit because it has an air process inside. It meets a higher standard of wastewater treatment. You go from 30 for an ATU to 10s or less for CBOD5 TSS for performance base.
Okay. So thank you for defining that for me.
You're welcome.
The proposed moratorium that the county is working on, the 65% number, is that performance-based? Is that the higher level?
It's manufacturer design. The National Science Foundation, NSF, they have an approval called NSF 245.
Right.
In the 245 alignment, they talk about what has to be removed, what percentage of nitrogen and phosphorus have to be removed. Each of the manufacturers have to guarantee that their system meets that or not. performance-based devices, just because of their nature of the way they process, they have a higher level of removal because they use both anoxic zones and aerobic zones.
So the proposed moratorium meets the NSF 245 level?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. The third, you talked about you can't use beach sand anymore because it percolates too fast.
Yes, that's correct.
So does that mean that there would be a problem using even these advanced systems on the outer islands or the islands or anywhere where we're mostly on beach sand?
Absolutely no problem to use them. You'll dig out the beach sand and put in slightly limited soil that gets imported.
Okay. And then Bill made a comment, we want to be a fix and not a cause. So does that mean that previous systems, existing septic systems, even if they're operating properly in 1965, are in fact a cause of nutrients into the lagoon?
I can't answer that with surety.
But we're saying we don't want to be a cause. So are the old systems a cause?
There are systems that were approved, as Bill said, in the 20s and 30s and 40s that are from me to you or me to the television set from the river.
Right.
I would vote if you went and sampled the river for caffeine, which is that's the simplest test. If there's caffeine in the water, guess what?
It came from a human.
It came from a human. It's easy to define.
Thank you.
Is the technology ahead of Tallahassee, or is the state law keeping up in general with the technology that's available?
Bring that pipe, Bill, that section. Excellent question. No, they're not keeping up with it. They have, no, this is even better than that. No, this is a new product that's been approved by Tallahassee for an ATU, and guess what? There are no pumps. There are no electricities. It's a piece of pipe that inside these little pieces, fats, oils, and greases hang onto those as the water moves up and down in the pipe. Around the outside is green batted material that is an attached growth media that the good aerobic bugs live on, because in the bottom, where it's always wet, there's some white media that the anaerobic bugs live on that they actually dissolve fats, oils, and greases. And the cool thing in this system is there's a 4-inch pipe at the bottom of this 12-inch pipe that the water moves through. In the upper section, there's a 4-inch coupling at the very end of the pipe that have 2 snorkels on each end. One's higher than the other. So it has a chimney effect that air is always moving through the pipes, pulling fresh air along. That's your aerobic zone. This by itself is now an ATU. No pumps, no electricity at all. And where you were asking my question, or the way I want to answer your question, not only is this approved as an ATU, the testing result shows it meets performance-based, and the manufacturer's already sued Tallahassee and an employee because they will not approve the numbers to be a performance-based as a static device.
Are there industry groups or other groups lobbying, pressuring, pushing to get Tallahassee into this century?
No, sir. I think Minnesota, Ohio, Virginia, and probably Florida is probably in the top 5 as far as being in the forefront of this. Like I said, this technology, the products, the parts, the pieces, the codes have been around for 35 years in Florida.
So it's a regulatory issue rather than a legal issue? A permitting issue rather than the law not accommodating the technology, or are we caught up?
The laws are written that third-party independent testing has to be chosen to do. If you and I develop this pipe to get NSF 245 certification, it's almost $700,000 to a company that's not that they're National Science Foundation. They're not a government agency, and your certification is good for 7 years. And then you got to get in your pocket again. So there's a discouragement. Why would you want to come to a state with a cool product if you've got to get that financially beat up?
Who's on the other side of this issue then? Is it traditional construction firms or bureaucrats or what?
I couldn't answer that at all. No, sir.
So it's just stupid?
Well, the contractors that I have as
To use your word.
the contractors that I have as repeat clients, they get it.
Yeah.
They get that, oh my gosh, I can build a 3-bedroom house instead of a 2-bedroom house on the same piece of dirt. My septic system is going to cost $8,000, but if I spend $17,000, I can almost double the value of the house.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have to have a big burial mound for an elephant in my backyard because I'm going to use drip irrigation 4 feet off the side of my house, just make a big U shape around my house and I'm done. I'm going to have that as a level playing field anywhere. Oh, I don't have to spend another $12,000 to raise my lot.
There's 18 inches in fill on every home site.
A lot of the contractors I work with get it. A lot of them, we build houses. We don't develop a lot.
Mark, the drip technology is really cool, and obviously you guys are working with it with septic tanks, but couldn't that same be applied to like reuse water or even well water? And if so, are you guys working or advertising that? I mean, in my yard, in my house, rather than having sprinklers that run and break and do everything else, I'd love to put a system like that in the ground.
Go do it. You're a homeowner. You don't need my help.
Well, yeah, I do. You've got the hose. I don't have the hose. What do you mean,
There you go.
I'm gonna need a lot more than 6.
There's 17 feet of hose.
I'm gonna need a lot more than 17 feet. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Are you guys advertising or marketing your services, or is anybody advertising or marketing that type of service for your
Taking an
standard?
existing well and watering your grass without a pump? No, sir. I don't know of anybody that's doing that.
Okay, I'll give you a call.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you told us about a guy with an artesian well that had, limited head pressure, and he used this piping.
Absolutely. It works like crazy. But nobody's advocating it. Nobody's talking.
Okay, but I mean, it can't be done, right?
It can be done, but I'm not out marketing that as a service. No, sir.
Okay, fine distinction.
Because a homeowner can do that. You don't need...
Lorraine?
Yeah, any idea what the expected life of the system is? So replacement?
The NetFM company, they warrant their, once again, I'll reference Israel, they warrant their pipe for 6 years, drip tubing, 7 years if it's an act of God. So there's kind of a magic number of 7 for them. The wastewater treatment plants, they're fiberglass, the ones that we're using today. That the actual box should last 50, 60 years. The pipe is high-density polyethylene or polypropylene tanks. The tanks that we're using now, the Fuji Cleans, there's an airlift system inside where you raise water up, and as the bubbles go up, it pulls the water along with it. That's the way big water tanks, the big elevated tanks, they pump air in the bottom of a water column, and it bubbles up, and it drags the water with it and fills up the tank.
The water towers.
The water towers. So same situation inside these little Fuji Clean systems. You bubble water up and it runs back to the front.
And did I understand the $300 to $400 per year testing for the permit? That's if...
It's required.
Okay.
It's a
That's
state law. That's the maintenance entity. Now,
We have to have inspections and maintenance.
that's just the water testing. The maintenance that you go out and they do quarterly, you'll have an individual contract with the installer or someone certified by the manufacturer. I've seen those from $400 to $600 a year. It depends on what the market will bear and what the homeowner's willing to pay and the level of service they want. So that's $50 a month to have the performance base in your yard.
Right, so when we went and visited various systems on a field trip, and I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but it was somewhere around $50 to $60 a month would be your cost as a homeowner to maintain one of these performance-based systems.
That's correct. I think that's a very good
And in some of the municipalities, currently, if you're on a septic system, you only pay for water. You don't pay twice as much for the sewage, and it works out to about the same $50 or $60. So from a homeowner's standpoint, it's almost a wash in cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're replenishing the water aquifer because it's all going back. There's no deep well injection. Never mind.
But if you're on a traditional septic system, perhaps 20, 30 years old,
Sure.
perhaps failing,
Sure.
you have no inspection requirements even on sale of the house.
That's
It
correct.
can just sit there and leak into the lagoon, whereas these advanced techniques that treat the water far better,
Correct.
far more,
Yes, sir.
have got all sorts of cost and regulatory burdens hung on them.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
There's a bad person here somewhere. Either that or a dumb person. I suspect they may be elected officials in Tallahassee.
One of the things that you mentioned about the processors, all of us have computers sitting in our desks right now that are turned on, waiting for you to come home because they love you so much. That CPU is adding 1 + 1, 1 + 1, 1 + 1. While you're gone, it's staying busy.
Yep.
These systems, when you're not there using it, not taking a shower, it's seasonal people that go and run or go back home, or snowbirds, or whoever's doing the development. These performance-based systems just make work for themselves. They'll polish the water that's inside until it's almost drinking water quality.
Within,
There's also telemetry type stuff that could be hooked up to systems to where on our smartphones, we could get alerts if there's any, the air pump quits or something like that too. So there's ways to control maintenance.
On the failure question, the air pump, the blower is like a big aquarium blower. I don't know if you have aquarium friends or you've had a big aquarium blower. It's 75 to 100 cubic feet per minute, and it hums. It's outside. There's diaphragms inside that will eventually wear out, but that's the maintenance entity's responsibility to
And
pull
they're
the
easily
cover, check it.
accessible.
Ma'am?
They're easily accessible.
Correct. It's not like you got to get inside of anything.
so there will be people watching this afternoon or tonight on this, hopefully. And on social media, you'll hear a number of people who simply make the absolutely no septic tank, on-site wastewater, whatever term we want to use, at all, should be near the lagoon. Defined near as 50 meters or 1,000 meters or whatever. Can you make the argument that using these newer performance-based systems, that the effluent that will end up in groundwater and will eventually end up in the lagoon is as clean or cleaner than what's coming from our community-based wastewater treatment systems?
The performance-based and the ATUs, particularly the performance-based, is far superior. Look at the numbers. The wastewater treatment plant is 250 to 300 milligrams per liter for total suspended solids. The performance-based system is 10. It's 20, 30 times less when you're required to test it.
But theoretically, the wastewater systems aren't going in the lagoon.
Of course they are, unless they're doing deep water injection. If the water's in the groundwater, it's going to roll into the lagoon.
No, the wastewater treatment plants.
Yes.
The wastewater, I was on staff at the city of Vero Beach for 12 and a half years. I've read the DEP permits. In Florida, they're allowed a pre-storm event pump down. If you're on an airplane or you see aerial photographs and there's circular basins that are like a donut, that they don't have an arched top over it, that's a wastewater treatment plant. Untreated raw sewage, when rainfall falls on the top of it, it's either going to splash out in the yard and staff's going to clean it up, or they have the option to pump it straight into the river untreated. Fort Pierce, Vero Beach, Melbourne, Palm Bay. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection has an incident report that's filed every time that something splashes or spills, everything from reuse water to effluent. You'll be surprised at how many millions of gallons per day are pumped raw, untreated, into the river. So you take a 300 gallon per day, 2 people in a septic tank on the canal that's failing, 2 million, 22 million, 15, 17 million gallons per day were pumped into the river from a wastewater treatment plant. Who has a more impact on the river? And that's a legal discharge. It's not, oh my gosh, we had an accident. Those happen too, and they report those. But look up the word incident reports.
We have.
Okay.
We have.
So, yes.
Thank you.
Far superior.
I think it would be good, when we're looking at, obviously these systems are very good, but when we're looking at a broad county strategy, clearly we're not going to be able to put one of these in every lot in the county. But and I think we need to differentiate between, there's incidences at the water treatment plants where there has to be discharges. What do we have to do to get the plants to the point where they're not doing that anymore? And in that case, how good is that in terms of nutrient additions to the lagoon compared to typical septic tank? So I think we need to define that at some point. I don't want to give the impression that that septic systems are better than the water treatment plants currently, or when we get the water treatment plants up to par, we have to make sure that we differentiate with that.
There are still many parts within the community that are not on community wastewater, that septic is the only option.
Absolutely.
Or there is no option.
Right.
And there are other places where the cost for us to go from a septic to sewer conversion may be extraordinary because of roads and drainage, et cetera. And in cases like that where septic is the only option, I think it's encouraging to know that these types of systems are out there. Absolutely. And they will not continue to contribute as the old systems, even when they were properly working, did contribute.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think what we need to make sure is that there's always a balance in what we say. Water treatment plants are not evil, neither is, septic tanks when both are working properly and maintained properly and installed properly. So that's what my point is. We want to make sure that we, keep that rhetoric to normal, balances.
One of the things that the Florida Administrative Code, the Department of Health 64E6 requires is when you do a performance-based system, you have to have it's almost like a deed restriction where the owner says, yes, that forever and ever there will be a performance based on this parcel of land. That gets recorded as an official record in the public records. Nice thing happens, it gets connected to the chain of title. A neighboring county has taken that one step further. I'd recommend it highly. What Bill and I see a lot are homeowners that are moving into a house. They have no idea what those two green little turtle shells are in their front yard. And all of a sudden, there's alarms going off. They didn't know they're supposed to have an operating permit for an ATU, not the performance-based, but the ATU. They go out and unplug the plug to stop the alarm because nobody told them what it was. And now their system's going to fail rapidly. Having just something as simple as an ordinance, and maybe that's part of when the study happens over the next 5 weeks, is, hey, if anything beyond a regular septic system, you really should make it a part of the title so that at least the homeowner, sometimes the realtors know, sometimes, well, maybe they don't. So having that as an official record as part of as your deed would go an amazing great way of just educating the people that, hey, these green lids that there's something under, I really got to take good care of those. But they don't know to because no one's taught them. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a realtor.
Okay.
I bought a house, and that exact situation happened to me.
Okay. Yeah, it's
So
not
it was
fabricated.
unplugged.
Your turtles? What?
No, the house was, the power was not on. The house was vacant. It was new construction, and it was never explained to me. I knew that it had a septic system. And then I got a letter from the county that I was required to have a permit.
$150.
Yes, and that I was in trouble because I didn't file for that maintenance program. And I faced all of that as a realtor, but I did know that I had a septic system. I just didn't know what type of septic system.
Oh, by the way, you get to go to see the special magistrate if you don't pay that.
Yeah, I got all different kinds of letters.
Okay.
And I just want to make note that there are loan programs that do require inspections. VA and FHA, if a house is vacant, it's required. So that is the only situation that I know of. Yes,
But
for
It
septic.
is getting better.
It's $8 of recording fees to put that as a septic system on here in your property that's an aerobic treatment unit. And the state of Florida has all the specs on it, and that gets into the chain of title. So when someone does, the bank looks through it and they go, oh my gosh, they've got this thing that's got to be maintained.
And we do have to make customers aware it is required to make customers aware
Sure.
if it is septic or sewer. So people do go in knowing.
And another wonderful solution or possible solution is that when the people buy their brand new house, just like you escrow your taxes or you escrow out your homeowner's insurance, escrow out that cost per year for your septic system maintenance. All of a sudden, Bill just gets a check. The homeowners aren't refusing, I'm not going to pay that. Right.
Good idea. I like that idea.
So it's I want you all more than anything else to pay attention to these details. Like you said, it's not this guy's bad and this guy's good or back and forth. It's as the county makes steps forwards, pay attention to all the details. There's lots and lots of little details that need to be addressed before the ink dries on the final product that you all help them create.
But it
Yes, sir.
strikes me overall that if we were to, not we, but government in general, will take a look at how to deal with this from a regulatory basis, that if the one time where government is always present is when there's a change of title, when a property is sold. And I wonder if a certification of the wastewater system at that property might not be a useful thing to attach to the sale. And that would apply not only to septics, to advanced septics, to new technologies we may see in the future, but also perhaps things like smoke testing sewers from the house to the street, et cetera, so that at that one place where you actually do get a snapshot of what's going on with wastewater at that particular waste generation site, that you at that point certify the system, septic, advanced technology, or even just plain old pipes.
I have had phone calls from people that are doing their personal due diligence going, hey, what, do you know what this is? You're an engineer.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, it's got a septic tank. Thanks. Yep, I'm going to buy this house. And I'm not trying to be offensive, but I see the worst and the best of the whole process. But you're right. There needs to be oversight, monitoring, watching.
Well, I want to say that was 11 years ago, and there is much more awareness today. But I'm saying I have experienced the unknowing, and
You and hundreds of thousands of others.
Todd.
I guess these are complex things, though, and I've heard a few statements here that, such as the including in title transfers. There are numerous things that are included in closing documents that people do not read, do not understand, and so I think we need to be careful about the reality of what occurs in those transactions and what occurs out in the population. And I do think it's important when we have DEP and the other utilities here talking in a couple months to understand, because some of the statements made here, I do feel like we're largely, marginalizing or criminalizing the public sewer systems, which candidly do treat in a public access reclaim system are very comparable to these. They are all tools in the toolbox, and we've got to look at the right situation for all of this, because while I have no issue with these, and I think in the right application, they're a wonderful tool for us. But there are considerations. You have 50,000 of these out there with each homeowner responsible for figuring out how to maintain it. There's issues associated with that.
No, the homeowner can't maintain
Sir,
it.
can I finish, please?
Sure.
There's issues with making sure that whether they're maintaining or they're contracting through licensed people. When you have that many activities going on, there's an administration and a management and enforcement issue, just like the fact that we've had certain utilities that may or may not have kept up with their obligations. So I think it's just important that we take a look at, we've got a variety of tools, and we need to make sure that all of them that we're using function well and that we understand the downsides of each of those.
Perfect. Perfect. It's the tool, you're right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Enjoy your day.
Good stuff.
And you can see their little demonstration.
Okay, it looks like we're going to be out late again.
All right. I think they're late.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for letting me be here today to talk about Florida-friendly landscaping. A lot of discussion about landscape stuff today, so I'll add to that, hopefully not subtract from that too much. And you all know what University of Florida Extension is, right? I don't have to give you that speech today. If you don't know, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to tell you. So what is Florida-friendly landscaping? Florida-friendly landscaping is horticultural best management practices. Basically, that's doing it right. And doing it right is going to promote low-maintenance plants and environmentally sustainable practices. I think that's something that all of us here are very interested in. The Florida-friendly landscaping program was developed with University of Florida and DEP several years ago. It utilizes peer-reviewed science information to provide a series of steps that homeowners, especially homeowners, can go through to have an environmentally friendly landscape, which is lagoon friendly also. So why do we teach this? Florida-friendly landscaping and these principles is we want to enhance water quality, quantity, and supply. That's one of our major initiatives as faculty here in Brevard County. We also want to enhance and conserve Florida's natural resources and environmental quality. So anything that Sally Scalera, who many of you know, and myself do, and Holly Abeals, who is our Marine Sea Grant agent, some of you know her. The reason we do the things we do are primarily for these two reasons right here. Everything we do. We could be teaching somebody to install a micro irrigation system, which we do, by the way. That's to reach one or both of these primary initiatives. So that's what Florida-friendly landscaping does as well. There are 9 principles to Florida-friendly landscaping. I'll go through each one in great detail. Dr. Windsor's giving me the look, so I won't do that then. But these 9 principles, I am going to talk about them just briefly. Right plant, right place. I heard a lot of discussion about we have to have natives in the landscape and it should be all natives, and I love natives and I promote natives and I talk a lot about natives, but I have seen landscapes in situations where natives were not the answer. Because if it is not the right plant in the right place, it is not going to thrive. I don't care how native it is. Okay? I've killed natives, and I'm a horticulturist, bona fide horticulturist. So right plant, right place is always our first mantra. We do a lot of classes and teaching people, don't we, Lorraine, on right plant, right place. There's a lot to that. It's a lot more than just saying, well, I'm going to run over to Rockledge Gardens, and I love Rockledge Gardens. I love Steve, too. Yay, Steve. I don't know, did he leave? It's a lot more. There's a lot more to it than that. Water efficiently. That's one of my primary areas of focus is on irrigation and watering efficiently. Watering inefficiently not only threatens our water quantity and our water supply, but it also affects water quality. And so that's something that I think is really important. Looking at how often people irrigate, installing micro irrigation systems. I do workshops. I make people do it hands-on. I make them get in there and actually put the things together and glue PVC and cut it and all that stuff. And so when they go home, they can do this. Fertilize appropriately. I think we've heard a little bit about that. There is a lot of science involved in fertilizer. It's not just a matter of throwing something out there in the grass or not throwing anything on the grass. And so there is a lot of science involved there. There's a lot of chemistry. We've been doing a lot of work, a lot of research at the office locally on soils and the importance of soils. We know that soils that are full of fungi and bacteria, as soils should be, are going to process nitrogen much more quickly, much more efficiently. They're going to turn that nitrogen into forms that plants can use much more quickly. So we're kind of renewing it, and this is happening university-wide. UF is we're trying to get UF to include a principle in FFL on soils, because we're learning so much about how important the soil is to fertilizer. You know, it's not simple. Fertilizer application is not simple. It's really complex. Mulch, that's one of the principles. You need to mulch, and you need to mulch appropriately. Attracting wildlife, that's not attracting just snakes and alligators and stuff to your yards, but that's also attracting those insects that are going to be beneficial and are going to munch down on those bad bugs, which is one of my favorite topics. Don't get me started. Managing pests responsibly. I heard someone mention pesticides. You know, pesticides covers everything from herbicides to insecticides to fungicides, bactericides, all of those things. We really work hard on making sure that people are reading the label. Pesticides go through rigorous research. They go through rigorous studies through the EPA and registration and FDACs and all of that stuff. And if they're applied incorrectly, then they are going to harm the environment. If they're applied correctly, which few people do unless they're trained, because there's this label on there and people don't read that label. And I'm a perfect example, and I'll just quickly give you a little anecdote here. So I had fire ants galore in my yard, and so, you know, I have a master's degree in horticulture. I think I'm smart, right? So I go down to the local box store, I buy the Amdro because that's what the university says to use, and I'm a University of Florida faculty member, so by golly, I'm going to follow our recommendations, right? So I go get it, and I put the stuff out there, and a couple of years goes by, and I just keep moving these fire ant nests all over my yard. And I'm like, Amdro doesn't work, university doesn't know what they're talking about, right? Because, you know, I have a master's degree, I know what I'm doing. So one day I got this crazy idea and I decided to read the label. Guess what? I was doing it all wrong. For 6 years I haven't had a single fire ant nest in my yard because I started doing it right. And so that's just to tell you that people just don't read the labels, and if you're using these things incorrectly, it's going to lead to problems. We talk a lot about recycling yard waste, and that's some people can't do that because of their HOAs, but that's important. Reducing stormwater runoff, we really focus a lot on that. That's a biggie, right? So that's one of the principles of Florida-friendly landscapes, and that may or may not be turf grass. That may be other ways to do that, right? And then protecting the waterfront. And so we're doing a lot of work with Tortoise Island and Satellite Beach. Many of you may be familiar with the grant that we got from NEP to look at Florida-friendly landscapes and fertilizer runoff versus conventional landscapes. And Craig Wallace, who's here with us today, has been really instrumental in helping us make that happen. But we've got some other things cooking at Tortoise Island too, which are pretty cool. And I think protecting the waterfront falls within that as we look at ways that we can plant material along the shoreline to help stabilize the soil, because erosion is a serious issue. Boy, don't get me started on stormwater ponds. So everything that we do within these principles is based on research that's been done at the University of Florida and other universities where we need to fill in the gaps. The way we do what we do is we hold workshops, classes, seminars. Those are the most common things we do. Conferences. We do a lot of education via telephone. You know, a lot of people will call me and say, you know, I've got this stormwater pond. There's lots of erosion. I've lost, 5 inches of my yard last year because of erosion. What can we do? So we do a lot of work that way. Emails, field visits. I do a lot of field visits, office visits, blogs, fact sheets. We are faculty. We have to publish or perish. So we get to do a lot of writing. Our websites, our social media, those are ways that we get the word out. I'm going to talk about what FFL is not, because there are a lot of misconceptions about what Florida-friendly landscaping is. First of all, it is not based on appearance only. None of us, even myself or Sally, can I go to a yard and say, that's Florida-friendly. We have to ask questions. We have to know, what are you doing in terms of fertility? What are you doing in terms of irrigation? What are you doing in terms of erosion control? What are you doing to enhance the soil? What are you doing to manage pests? There's a lot more to it than just looking at it and say, well, that's really pretty, that must be Florida-friendly. Or that's really pretty, it has lots of natives, it must be Florida-friendly. So it's not just based on appearance. If we're going to certify a Florida-friendly yard, we're going to go with this long checklist. It's crazy, actually. We're going to go with this long checklist, and we're going to ask a lot of questions, and we're going to do some inspection on our own, too. We want to look for micro-irrigation and no natives, and we want to look for right plant, right place. And that's something that takes a little bit more expertise than just looking at a landscape and deeming it Florida-friendly. It's not natives only. Okay, it's not. There are many non-native plants that don't require a lot of fertilizer, don't require a lot of water. Dr. Ed Gilman is a professor emeritus now at the University of Florida, and he was our woody plant guy. He was the tree and shrub guru. And Dr. Gilman kept getting all these comments about how native plants don't need any water and they don't need any fertilizer. And Dr. Gilman said, you know, as a horticulturist, we all know that's not true. Right, all plants need nutrients and all plants need water. How they get it, well, that's a whole different thing, right? But so he did a study looking at native shrubs and how much water do they need compared to conventional shrubs. And what he found was that they're really very similar. Right? They're very similar. During establishment, even native plants need water. And Steve earlier gave really good recommendations on how much water to give established plants. So I won't repeat that. So what we found was basically they need the same. And there's mature trees and shrubs, even non-natives don't need additional water. We don't need to be watering our trees and shrubs when they're mature. So those are things messages that we try to get out. It is not no turf. Now, I am not a big fan of turf grass either. Okay, and just let me say, but there are people who have turf grass, and I always say, when people say, well, we need just to eliminate turf grass, I think that's really unreasonable. We're not going to get everyone to eliminate their turf grass. Those people who are not going to eliminate their turf grass, let's teach them how to manage that turf grass right. Okay, for those of us that don't want turf grass, then let's not have it. Okay, but for everyone else that's going to have it, especially in these HOAs, we really need to work with them on managing it correctly rather than hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that they'll just get rid of it, because that's not going to happen. Now, I will tell you, I'm working with an HOA right now on reducing the turf grass in their common areas, and I think that is a realistic expectation. If we can get them to reduce turf grass in common areas, I think that's a big win right there. And so I've got an HOA, a rather large one, that's really interested in doing this, so fingers crossed that we can do something. FFL is not unattractive, and that's a comment that we hear often too, especially from HOAs, right? Well, it's all weedy and just a bunch of plants all growing and everything. Well, that's me. I have a plant addict. I'm a plant addict, so that's me, right? That's my yard. And that's why I don't live in an HOA. So, I can do what I want in my yard, whether I'm a horticulturist or not. So it's not unattractive. It can be very attractive. And it's not necessarily informal. It can be formal, which we know a lot of HOA yards are kind of formal, right? Florida friendly can still be formal. Okay, so those are some of the misconceptions. And it's not necessarily chemical free, just like organic food is not chemical free. Okay, and so that's another conversation that some of you might want to have with me someday. But that's another misconception, is that FFL is chemical free, because if you're using a homemade herbicide such as vinegar and salt and Dawn dishwashing liquid, those are chemicals. And we know that too much vinegar in the environment is harmful to aquatic organisms. So don't do that. Don't just assume that because it's something that's in your kitchen, you can just throw it out there in the landscape and it's not going to harm anything. That is so incorrect. So it's not chemical free. We do teach people to use as few pesticides as possible. I have a 1/4 acre of plants. And oh my gosh. It's like, this time of year when it starts raining, I'm just like, oh my gosh. Why did I do that? Oh my gosh. And I've been there 12 years, and one time I used a pesticide. One time I had to use a pesticide because I got this crazy idea I was going to grow a peach tree. And peach trees are just really hard to do without fungicides and stuff. And I just gave up finally. I just yanked that tree out and threw it away, put it in the compost bin. It's like, I'm not going to do it because I personally don't want to have to use pesticides just because it's problematic for me. But I do have a yard full of beneficial insects. And they munch away, and I'm out there with my camera, and my neighbors are looking at me like, they got their binoculars out. Like, there's that weird neighbor again out there. What is she doing? Crawling around in the grass with a camera. But I've got some cool pictures. So how do we measure success? And I thought, well, I'm not going to bore you guys with our annual reports, which are usually about 60 pages long. If you're really bored and you really want to read those, holler at me and I'll share those with you. But one thing that we do is we create objectives for our programs. We're very objective oriented and we're very outcome oriented. And so we create objectives, and I pulled one of Sally Scalera's objectives. I told her I was going to throw her under the bus today. But here's just an example of one of her objectives from 2014 to 2017. At least 75% of participants in FFL classes will adopt 2 FFL practices. We're really big on adoption and behavior change and practice change. I don't care how much you learn. If you don't do anything with what you learn, it really really isn't, it's not good for me and it's not good for the Indian River Lagoon. What's good for us is that you actually did something, right? If you come to one of my workshops on micro irrigation and you never install that micro irrigation system, so what? Well, now you know how to cut PVC and glue it together. That's great. But I want you to put it out there so that you can start saving water. We evaluate until the cows come home. We evaluate everything that we do as much as we possibly can. Pre-test, post-test, post-reflective surveys, follow-up surveys. If you come to one of our programs, you're probably going to get a follow-up survey, Lorraine, in about a few months on the Florida Friendly Landscaping class you came to. And then this table right here just quickly kind of shows you, this is just one class. This is a small class, but these are some of the behavior changes that we got in this class. 4 people out of 14 reduced the frequency of irrigation during the summer. That may not sound like a lot, but it could be that the other 10 people already had good irrigation practices, or it could be that a few of them just don't want to change, right? So that's how we look at this, and that's how we look at whether or not we're successful. Obviously, I'm not going to ask y'all to read this, because who wants to read all that? I didn't even want to read it. It was writing it was hard enough. So out of one small program that I did last year, one small class that I did, not program, one small class I did last year on micro irrigation and Florida-friendly landscapes, how to design a landscape, the results, the survey results from that told us that we had an estimated savings of 192,000 gallons of water just based upon the adopted changes that those people in those classes did, right? So they changed the behavior, which resulted in collectively as that much of a reduction in water, which saved them about $563 in their water bills. And I remember I'm talking about a very small group here, okay? I'm not talking about, you know, a collection of a whole year's worth of classes. That was just one little class that we did. So, but I think that's really significant to point out that those classes that we are doing are having a significant impact, albeit small, because there are only 2 of us, plus a bunch of volunteers doing this work. But I still think that, you know, it's a pretty big impact. So your local UF faculty, Sally Scalera, many of you know, she has a BS in horticulture and an MS in ed. She trains the master gardeners. Master gardeners are really important to our homeowner education because they're the ones that have the most contact with them, so they're really important to us. She does educational programs that target homeowners, and she also works on the My Brevard Yard program. The My Brevard Yard program is nothing more than a marketing term, a marketing program that we put together. It's FFL, it's Florida Friendly Landscaping, all day, all night. But we wanted to market something, a program that was appealing to the local community. So that's why we did My Brevard Yard. I have a BS/MS in ornamental horticulture and landscape design. I do a lot of work in sustainability and community engagement here in Brevard County. I also do a lot of horticultural sustainability programs with a focus on water conservation. Right now I'm working a lot with HOAs and COAs, also working with someone in Cocoa Beach. Maybe we're going to start working with hotels. There's some interest there on working with them and getting them to have Florida-friendly landscapes. So I think that could be a big score. So I'm really excited about that and see where that might go. Stormwater ponds, big issue in Brevard County, especially as our homeowner associations start aging. These ponds are starting to become problematic with erosion and muck, and you know, they've just been poorly maintained or not maintained. And so I get a lot of calls about how to deal with erosion and stuff. So we're working on putting together a program to help them out. We do a lot of community gardens. We also are looking at rain gardens. We're looking at maybe working with Tortoise Island on doing some rain swale gardens. That's something that we see a lot of potential for in the county to help filter some nutrients. And irrigation composting. And right now our commercial horticulture position is vacant, but that person works with the industry and the municipal employees and county employees and so on and so forth. So that blue box down there just kind of highlights what our areas of expertise are, you know, from the science side of things. Soil science, you see soil science on there. That's a big, big deal. I cannot tell you how important that, the more we learn about soil, how important that is to all of these things that we talk about when we talk about water quality, because that soil plays a big, big part in that. And when we have these new developments, especially here in Viera, when they strip off that topsoil and they come back in with that other soil or that other stuff, you know, it's soil, but boy, it's really hard to deal with. And we get a lot of calls to come out to Viera and to look at plant problems. And those plant problems start occurring about 2 to 3 years after they take over. And I've pulled plants out and you get a sucking sound, right? Because the clay is just so dense, it's so compacted. And it's just not great for our plant material. There's plant material that will do really well in clayey soils, but we don't grow them here, right? So that's a real challenge for us too. So somehow we got to figure out how we can work with developers to solve that issue, because that is a big issue and has a big effect on fertilizer. Because when that fertilizer hits that clayey soil, it is not going to stay where it needs to stay if it even gets down in there. That's how hard and compacted some of those soils are. So anyway, I think that's all I have. Questions?
Can I just say, thank you so much for everything you do for the community. I think these results are so underestimated, because I, as a result of taking your classes, changed 4 of my behaviors,
Yeah.
but I have at least a half a dozen neighbors that have done so too. So in terms of bang for the buck,
Yeah, yeah.
you have a great operation with great results, and I mean, it's the best kept secret.
Thank you. Well, we hate hearing that, but thank you. I mean, we like hearing that, but we don't like hearing that. Yeah, we don't like the secret part.
That was great, Linda. So if there was one action that could be taken to promote the native lands or the Florida-friendly landscapes, what would it be? What would you suggest if you had the power to go do something, an ordinance or education?
I would say more boots on the ground is really, I would say it's 2 things. More boots on the ground, and those boots could come in many different shapes and sizes, but those boots may be marketing dollars. You know, some way to get inserts into bills, and, you know, however it is that, you know, that's probably our greatest challenge, is how do you reach people in 2018, right? Used to be we could write an article and put it in Florida Today and almost everyone would know. Well, and we can't not do something in Florida Today, because there's still a population and that's where they get their news. We can't just do Facebook. We can't just do websites. You know, it's really complicated, and we beat our heads against the wall trying to figure out this problem too. And I'm sure there are people who are experts in this, but I'm not. So that, I guess my number one wish would be a way to reach more people. Good question.
Anybody else? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Rich.
We're supposed to be done. We'll see.
Let's see, DMV, the movie one. Here.
This one?
Yeah, that one. Good morning. My name is Rich Dunkel, and I appreciate the opportunity to present here. I'm going to talk to those people that have turf grass and sprinkler systems in a more efficient way of sprinkling and save water. I travel around the state, and I talk to a lot of communities that want to use less water because they don't want to drain the aquifer. Brevard County, to their credit, is looking at precise irrigation so you have less runoff and less nutrients from reuse water getting into the surface waters. So this is about a 4-minute video that really tells the whole story. So.
The Irrigreen Genius Sprinkler System is the first truly smart sprinkler head on the market. It is the first major advancement in sprinkler head technology since the invention of sprinklers in 1871. For the first time in the history of mankind, we are taking water out of aquifers faster than they are able to be replenished. The Environmental Protection Agency says that 7 billion gallons of water are used for landscape irrigation in the U.S. every day. They estimate that up to 50% of that water is wasted. Let me repeat that. 50% is wasted. As the public awareness of the importance of water conservation grows, the need for a smarter irrigation system becomes more and more significant. We fill that need. A typical yard is divided into zones. Conventional irrigation systems surround your lawn with numerous sprinkler heads and water your lawn with multiple overlapping circles and arcs. As you can see, much of your lawn gets overwatered and some of your lawn may not get enough. Irrigreen's Genius heads are placed away from curbs, walks, and driveways, and watered to the exact shape of your lawn. Irrigreen irrigation systems use up to 50% less water than conventional systems, are far more flexible. They put water only where it's needed. So how does it work? Mapping the coverage for each lawn is easy and intuitive. Simply select the zone with the Irrigreen mobile app. Turn on the sprinkler, point the water at a landscape feature, and set the distance. As you set the distances for your lawn, the mobile app displays each distance and illustrates the zone for you on the phone. So mapping complex shapes, contours, and corners is easy, intuitive, and fun. A single Genius sprinkler installed in the middle of a lawn zone waters with uniform precipitation to the exact shape of your lawn. Amazing. Irrigreen systems, changing the way we water the world.
So that is essentially the product. Okay. Anybody want to watch it again? So if you're the overspray, doing the sidewalks, doing the streets, it can be taken out of the mix with the Irrigreen system. If that's something that and it's designed for small commercial or residential. So if that's something that is of interest and you want to dig into this a little bit more, typically it requires looking at the landscape ordinance because it's usually written for head-to-head, what they call head-to-head, which is the circular, which causes what they call haystacks of water in certain areas and no water in other areas. So we've worked closely with the Florida Irrigation Society. They like it. This has been tested around the country. California did some extensive testing on it. But unfortunately, what gets tested in California doesn't always transfer to Florida. There's a competition between the two states. So we've already done one round of testing with Michael Dukes up at Gainesville. He's about to say he would have probably completed his second set of tests, but it's been raining. So there's several counties and municipalities that are doing demonstrations comparing it to the water consumption in places where they're either using potable water, which is unbelievable, for irrigation, or they have metered water, reuse water, to show that using soil sensors, soil moisture sensors, and the Irrigreen system, you use less water and get good results. So if this is something that you have an interest in, I can work with the appropriate person and we can dig through the ordinance and see if this is something that you want to demo or look into. So I welcome any questions or comments. Yes, sir.
4,000 square foot yard, 3 heads, estimated cost?
It's going to cost more, but it's going to take less time to put in. So the installers like this because they can get more houses done in a day than putting in the typical system with all those multi-heads. You're using depending on the design of the lawn, you might use one of these heads for 6 or 7 of the small rotor heads, and you get better coverage. Plus, at the end of the day or at the end of the year, you get an ROI because you're using less water if it's metered and if you're paying for it.
If installation is reduced, installation time, i.e. labor, is reduced, why would it cost more?
Well, the parts and pieces cost more. Usually it's a wash, but I don't speak for the installers. Our distributor is Coast Pump and Irrigation, and it's new to Florida. It's being installed in other counties and places, so we can show other states' cost figures, and that's what I say. If you really want to dig into this, I didn't know to what level this committee worked at, but if you wanted the spreadsheets, I can certainly make them available in the future.
If
Yeah.
you already have an existing traditional sprinkler system, can the piping in there be adapted to put these heads in or not?
How is it they say it depends? Because see, this can be connected to your mains. So if the area that needs to be irrigated is in the right place, then by putting in the head in the appropriate place, you can get a good swing on the whole thing. This, by the way, I can almost not hear it myself, but it's out of Minnesota, and the fellow that invented it has about 30 or 40 patents in inkjet printing. And when his wife wanted to get an irrigation system because she was tired of hauling around the hoses, he said, what do you want? What's the state of the art? And he looked at it and he said, oh man, that's crazy. So he ended up designing this, and it's been around for about 10 years now, and it's been installed a lot out west. And it's efficient, and as I said, I can send spreadsheets on the savings, on the cost for installation, and retrofitting. There's some over in the east part of the or the western part of the state. They're looking seriously, some of the home builders, at retrofitting some of their existing facilities because they're running out of water. They're bumping up against the CUPs, including the villages.
This is just kind of curiosity, and it probably doesn't exist, but Morris spoke earlier about an in-ground system that Mr. Smith did, and I happen to be familiar with that system. I wonder how much water that system that Morris talked about uses, and how much water your system that you're talking about uses versus what the normal homeowner would use on a, 5,000 square foot lawn. It would be interesting just to know how much water savings, and there's probably runoff involved. And I'm not sure we need to spend a lot of time, but I do think it'd be an interesting comparison.
As I said, if you want to really dig down deep into this, that's probably better a one-on-one conversation and then get it designed than for the whole committee. We'd be happy to do it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I'll be at Waterfest tomorrow with samples of the sprinkler head, and I'll have some other products there that you might be interested in. And once again, thank you for the invitation.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Jane Hart from Brevard County Natural Resources. I was asked to be here today to demonstrate the newly developed Living Shoreline Story Map. Can I just... But before I get into that, I just wanted to present some information. Right. On our Geiger Point reef that we installed in November. So we had our first monitoring event at the end of April and May 1st. And I just wanted to bring you some good news about what we found. Brevard Zoo, Restore Our Shores, and staff from the County Natural Resources went out. And what we found was we had 98.5% survival at this reef. This reef is over 1,300 linear feet of shoreline. We installed 52 20-foot modules, so that's a little over 1,000 feet of oyster reef. We used gardened oysters there. So we have 98.5% survival. There was a 26.5% increase in growth during this time. shell length went from 38.1 millimeters average to over 48 millimeters. And we also had spat recruitment. That was big. We really, we're very happy that we had spat recruitment at this site. One of the remarkable things that is, the take-home message from this is that we had survival, growth, and recruitment during a period of 3 months of intense brown tide. The graph is from data from University of Florida showing that brown tide at their collection point, which is right off of State Road 192 near the bridge, near where our oyster reef site, for over 3 months, cell densities were over 1 million cells per milliliter for brown tide. Our oysters survived, they grew, and they recruited. So I just wanted to bring this information because it was phenomenal news for us, and we're very excited, and I wanted to share it with you today. Okay, so just as a refresher for the shoreline survey and mapping project that we did in 2016, the county, they initiated the development of a shoreline habitat restoration and management plan. 2 main goals. The first is to identify and prioritize environmental enhancement and erosion protection areas along the lagoon, and then also to encourage and expand the use of living shorelines to community members in Brevard County. So the first thing, to identify and prioritize, we embarked on a shoreline survey in 2016 and 17. We contracted with the University of Central Florida to perform that survey, and they covered over 200 miles of shoreline along the IRL in Brevard County. These are some of the attribute data that they collected, and then at the end of the project, we mapped it, and that's what the shoreline map was created with. This is some of the results, the 3 major shoreline types that we have: bulkhead, hardened slope, and then no structure. So over 61% of the Brevard County shoreline is already hard armored with either the vertical or sloped hardened shoreline. These are some of the pictures of the types of hardened shorelines that we have: bulkhead with riprap in front of it, a hardened slope, rock revetment, or bulkhead with outfalls. They also mapped outfalls during the shoreline survey. They also measured erosion by height of scarp at all the data points. There was over 10,000 data points, and over the 45% have either moderate to severe erosion, so that was a concern. And then they also, if there was evidence of oysters along the shoreline at any of these 10,000 points, they noted it. And oysters were noted at over 2,800 shoreline locations. Most of this is the southern portion of the Indian River Lagoon. So we created a story map, an interactive map, to present some of the data that we thought would be useful for homeowners who are considering the use of living shorelines at their property. So we wanted to provide some basic information on living shorelines, their benefits, and also present some of this mapped data. So this is the shoreline map. I just connected through the URL. And the first tab is just general information on living shorelines. It's interactive. They can open up any of the images. The second tab presents more information specifically on design and the different types of living shorelines that are available. And then the third tab starts the data, the shoreline data. And this is interactive. You can zoom in to a parcel that you're interested in. And this one shows the different edge types in Brevard. Over here, so if you clicked on one, it would pop up. That edge type is a rock revetment. This gives an example of what rock revetment or natural shoreline or seawall bulkhead. And then you can scroll down and it will give just some general design examples for living shorelines that may be suitable at that type of a shoreline. And then these open up larger. So you can see at a natural shoreline, we would suggest native vegetation to control erosion and to provide water quality benefits. Then the next tab shows erosion that was measured during the shoreline survey. And they can again zoom into an area or a parcel, click on it, the shoreline, and it will give the estimated erosion at that site. And then the third tab is the oysters in Brevard. And I'm going to back out because I'd just like to show you the visual of where they were located during the shoreline survey. And I just wanted to add that the federal areas weren't surveyed during this. They are going to be surveyed. UCF has a different contract through NEP, different projects. But for our project, they surveyed from Titusville all the way down, but did not survey the federal area. So we're not really sure about the oyster, if oysters are there or not. But you can see the majority are in the southern part of the county.
And there's evidence of at some point.
Right. So if they saw an oyster on a dock piling or on a rock revetment or some other, maybe mangrove roots, living or dead, but they said if it was a shell, they marked it as a data point. So that's what these are. And then there's just the last two tabs. This is all information about the project, if anyone wanted to read about our project. And then the last is community resource page. And I wanted to just show you that we've put a bunch of great information for people who are interested in living shorelines. There's also a brand new publication that IFAS Florida Sea Grant has put out that is on permitting small-scale living shorelines. And they could click on this, and this would be a great guideline for homeowners of navigating them through the permitting process for a small-scale living shoreline project. So that's all I have. Yes?
What's the address for this, the website?
For the shoreline map?
For everything we just looked at. Yeah.
The main URL you click.
Okay, let me get back to right there. It's http://
Can we change that?
No, that's what Esri is.
No, but you can buy pointers that'll just point to
Oh,
that.
like a tiny URL type of thing?
Yeah, but a real named URL.
Is there a link from the Brevard County page, or we have to have this specific?
I don't know if it's on.
Yeah, right.
You could probably Google Brevard County Shoreline Public Map and it would pull up. No.
Brandon put it up on the Save Our Lagoon Facebook page, but I don't know if it is on.
There's so much text in there, Courtney, I don't even know if the indexing would pull it up in a good Google search.
We'll get with Vinny, we'll
Yeah,
figure out how to.
We'll get it.
I'd like to be able to point people
Yes.
and go, here's shoreline map, those of you arguing about oysters, here's evidence, here's this,
We'll
here's
put it at
that.
johndurkey.com. You go there and it'll take you right there.
Can you guys just email us that link?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then we can, because I think a lot of us are going to want to post it to our Facebook pages today, to
And we plan to add to it. We're going to add in another tab with vegetation, and because UCF also mapped not only mangroves and different vegetation, but also where exotic and invasive species were, so that might be of use for people who are pepper busting.
I have a question for Virginia. Do you staff have access to an information specialist to help curate and collate and codify and present all this stuff? Because it's getting around to where you say there's got to be a pony in there somewhere. There is just so much information that we are aggregating through the process just simply of these meetings that I think it's outside the scope of skills and knowledges of we amateurs and lay people, and needs an information specialist. Does that exist inside the county? Well, then maybe we need to think about that for the next project plan, or discretionary spending.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do. Are you comfortable enough with the May results at Geiger Point to maybe put out some sort of a press release or a short video or?
I am. We need to talk with the zoo as well, but
because one of the questions that comes up a lot is why are you putting oysters in a dead lagoon? And I'm tired of trying to answer that question. I try to point them to data that's out there, and like John says, there's so much out there, people get lost in trying to find it. So just what the slide you showed today was so good. I just, the data, the growth. and I mean, it's awesome.
That's an excellent
But, I
point.
mean,
And-
you may be uncomfortable at this point releasing that kind of information, but it's already out now. And so, anyway, think about, talk to the folks and see if we can make a press release of some sort.
Okay. And I'd like to add, when we were out there doing the monitoring, water was clear. It was, it was improved from, Secchi depth went during the height of the Aria Umbra there. I think it was like 0.4 meters is what University of Florida said. When we were there, water was clear. There were schools of anchovy. There was mullet jumping. We saw big, large red fish and some striped trout was there. There's dolphins jumping in the cove, and so it was just a great day, and it was just really a testament to the resilience of the lagoon. And so we've created some habitat there, and obviously the local critters were loving it. So thank you.
Great job.
Right, Virginia.
So the reason I have the venue change back on here is we have been relocated to the county commission chambers. The setup there is going to be a little better than what would be available in the Space Coast room. So the next meeting in July will be at the county commission chambers.
Could I ask a question? How will 14 of us get to sit at 7 chairs?
Yes.
We'll be sharing.
Sharing?
So
All right.
we'll have the 7 members at the front and the alternates on one side and staff on the other side. And so it won't be as nice as here, but here isn't an option, so.
Okay.
All right. A question?
So there's these really cool things over there. Is somebody going to explain to us what we have?
Well, those were really for tomorrow, but since they were almost ready, we brought them. So they are they're to show the difference in scale between the different size algae that we have here in the lagoon. And so they're at approximately 1 micron has been scaled to 1 inch. So you can see the tiniest thing there on the left, the blue cyanobacteria. Oh, thank you, Vanna. Right? That's what's been blooming down in St. Lucie and in Lake Okeechobee and relates to the southern end of the lagoon. We haven't had that problem. The next one over, the green, this was what was in the super bloom in 2011 was primarily that size critter. The purple one that's Oriumbra, the size of the brown tide organism. And then the big thing hanging there, that's Pyrodinium. That's the thing that flashes and sparkles in the middle of the night. That's why we all kayak and paddleboard in the middle of the night. That one is not to scale because I ran out of tie wraps. But this is, it is a red, which is why it's painted red, and it is Oxyrus marina, although there's another pronunciation of that, oxyrhis, whatever. Anyway, so the red thing that has been blooming intermittently in the Cocoa Beach canals in the last couple weeks, that's what that gizmo is, and it's a dinoflagellate, which is why it has those tails, and it eats the brown tide. Yay! Yes.
Then what happens to it?
And so that's another red Fibrocapsa japonica. When we were trying to figure out what was blooming red in the Cocoa Beach canals, there were multiple samples taken, and that was one of the things that was discovered. And then we have Pseudonichi, which is one of the things that's been commonly blooming in the lagoon for decades, just a long skinny guy. And then we have 2 examples of diatoms. So this is the size of normal algae in the lagoon that are the favorite food of the food web, the copepods and rotifers and things. And this is what we want. This is where the nutrients in the lagoon should be, in these beautiful large algae, instead of in these teeny tiny ones that grow and multiply very quickly and break down and release their nutrients very quickly and cycle all too fast. So hopefully the idea is by having these weird things, people want to come to our booth and ask questions. And so that's thanks for asking.
That was great. Daryl, cut that out and make a little 1 minute that she just did explaining all of those. Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. All right. Final comments?
Public comment or final?
No, final comments.
Go ahead.
Please.
I had two things. First off, I know I've talked to Morris about, and Linda talked about the micro irrigation, but Keith Winston, and I don't want to say it without giving him props for it, he had talked about factors that affect behavior change, and one of them was market factors. And I understand that Linda teaching people to go and micro irrigate is a great thing, because there are people out there that are going to go get in their yard and do that. But there are also a lot of people that are going to pay somebody to say, hey, can you just go do it for me? Because I don't either have the time or the care to know. And I don't know, I guess I'll talk to the camera. Somebody out there, start a business or do something where you're offering micro irrigation. I think that that's a market force that can help us drive to use water more efficiently and properly, which leads me to my second thing. I know one of the municipalities, and this is Melbourne, they have a water reuse week where they're going to tell people to get to know the benefits of reclaimed water. And as we know, there are benefits for it, but I think there's also dangers for it. It's the number 4th contributor to new sources of nitrogen in the lagoon. So I know other municipalities may be talking about it and introducing people to it. I would hope that they would also talk to them about the importance of making sure that they're using it properly and not having runoff, and making sure that they're not, spraying it into the roads or into their driveways or whatever. So those are just the two things that I had.
One of the topics of discussion here is, and it's in the packet, it'll be online, is available online, is wastewater systems in the county, and great concern with the sewage overflows from Hurricane Irma and so on. There's 3 numbers that are present in the information we have here. I hope I got it right, that I'd like to highlight. The first number is 9. There are 9 independent wastewater treatment systems in the county. The county has 1, and 8 municipalities have them. So if you're talking to the county and you're in a municipality that has a wastewater system, you're in the wrong church. The second number I would highlight is 110. That's the annual budget for these 9 systems for operations, maintenance, and repair, $110 million. That's more than twice as much as this committee has to accomplish all the other things that are in the 100-page project plan that's laid out and approved by the county commission. So this may not be the right place to go look for new money. And speaking of new money, there are also, not accounted in that $110 million, grants and special appropriations to deal with capital improvements and new capabilities. And the third number I would highlight is a fraction, is 2/10. The concern is how much more nutrients went into the river as a result of Hurricane Irma overflows and problems with the sewer system. So the answer is 2/10, but that's not 2/10 of the new nutrients that went in. That's 2/10 of 1% of the nutrients that went in the river. Sewage overflow is a serious problem, but it is not a serious nutrient problem from a dollar percentage viewpoint. So those are just 3 numbers I'd like to highlight: 9, 110, and 2/10 of 1%. Thank you.
Anyone else? I wanted to mention that the Marine Resource Council is having a fundraiser this Saturday after Waterfest from 2 to 5 at the Yellow Dog Cafe. And I'm sure they would love, the food selection looks awesome. I'm sure they would love to have members from the community come and attend. So thank you all. And with that, we will adjourn.
Excuse me, we have a speaker?
That time is over.
Yep.
That time is over. I'm sorry, we announced that at the beginning. as part of our thing. So please come back. We'll save you for the next time. Thank you. We're adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.